Welcome back to the Goodwill Podcasting. Alongside us, as always, Dan, and we have a special guest today with Stone. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, guys? Welcome to my car.
Your
Where
scenery
I'm
is
doing
gorgeous.
this podcast. Thank you.
You're in Starbucks parking lot. Are we gonna have to give them any compensation?
I don't know. I got all the cups at home. Let me see. We got a logo on this cup, so we're gonna keep that down. A logo on that cup, so we're gonna keep that down. But no, I'll hide it. I think we'll be all right. Who knows? Maybe they'll sponsor you.
You really are a white girl with Taylor Swift in your top 5
Yeah,
and at Starbucks right now.
Cruel summer, man. I'm telling you what. It was a pretty brutal summer, and that song gave me comfort. I'll tell you what.
What's the Starbucks order, Stone?
Oh, I worked at Starbucks. Shoot, when did I start working at Starbucks?
You're just digging yourself deeper.
That's fine. It's all right. I like working at Starbucks. I always told people I worked when I was in college. I worked at an actual gourmet, not gourmet, but a local coffee shop that was very nice. Very wealthy people owned it. And I didn't know, all these people know at those types of coffee shops know very scientific, like how to tamp things, and the water has to be a certain temperature. I always told people, I was a barista there, because you can still work there and not be a barista, but I always told people I thought I was good at it because no one ever complained. Can't tell you any scientific thing about it, but no one ever came up to me and said, hey, this drink is really shitty. So I was like, I did pretty good. But yeah, at Starbucks, I started working at Starbucks in 2020, actually because of COVID, and because I got laid off somewhere else, and I lost 50 pounds.
Damn.
In 2020, because at the same time, so what I did was I worked at Starbucks and I worked at Walmart. And at Walmart, I was a online grocery shopper, so I would walk around for 8 hours of the day, and that was freshly out of college too. So I gained 50 pounds during college, and I lost 50 pounds the year after college. But because I was on that fix of trying to lose weight, I've always gotten a venti iced skinny vanilla latte, and I've gotten that for like 3 years now.
That's some jet fuel. That's good.
Yeah, but these people actually got it wrong. I'm not going to tell you what Starbucks I'm at, so the listeners of this show put bad Yelp reviews on, but they got it wrong. That's all right. That's all right.
Don't want to dox the Starbucks, so it'll be bad.
It's supposed to be not that milk, and they gave me regular milk, but I'm not bitter about it. It's fine. I'm gonna gain some weight, but it's fine. Speaking about gaining weight, because I'm recently in New Jersey and I moved from New Orleans. In my place in New Orleans, they had a Raising Cane's right down the road. I have not weighed myself in a long time. Let me say.
I've heard good things about Raising Cane's.
Oh, the bad thing about it is that it was right down the road. I'll tell you that. But yes, it's pretty tasty, I gotta say. But
There's a Cane's there's a Cane's 2 minutes from my house, but Cane's is so aggressively mid, but the sauce makes it worth it.
Sauce is pretty good.
Yeah. I've never even seen one. So
really,
no,
they're out there. I'm telling you.
Chick-fil-A is far better. Cane sauce just makes it worth it.
Chick-fil-A, every Chick-fil-A around me just prints money. There's the line is preposterous no matter what time of day, no matter what day, except for Sundays. But yeah, Chick-fil-A goes crazy and around Philly.
If I was a business, I would just sell the exact same thing as Chick-fil-A, but then just be open on Sundays, and then you get all their business.
Yeah, dude, just pull up a food truck and call it the Side Chick or something. Why are we podcasting?
Should be in the chicken business. All right, we got to get off the chicken talk.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, today we are talking all of David Fincher's filmography. These two did a little better research than I did. So we'll start off with one I haven't seen, Alien 3. What's your boys' thoughts?
Stone, you want to start?
I can go first, yeah. I'm excited. I know that there was a lot of... I watched a video on it. So this is the only one of Fincher that I haven't watched recently. I watched all of the Alien films for the first time. Not all of them for the first time, but I did a binge of all the movies back in August, I think. And that's the first time I watched Alien 3. And I watched a video afterwards, and I know that there's a lot of production issues that Dan might know better than me. but a lot of it wasn't his fault why it was bad. But especially, I think I have it at 2.5, and I do think it's his worst film probably. But I think and a lot of people don't think that. Like I've seen other rankings where it's not in the bottom. But when you watch Alien and then Aliens and then Alien 3, that puts a really big distaste in your mouth. Because it's just not up to the same standards. There's a lot of very interesting ideas in it, but I will tell you one thing though. There's a lot of iconic scenes in the franchise, but towards the end of the film, there is, in my opinion, a scene that is unforgettable. Do you want me to tell you about it, Connor? You wanna experience it
Oh
the
yeah,
first time?
feel free.
There's a scene where basically someone's just running away from an alien, and it's really horrible to look at. It's one of the camera and what it's doing. If I remember correctly, it keeps showing the same shot over again of the guy's face running away and then the hallway. But then what looks very terrible is at first I thought it was CGI, but I think they actually used a puppet. They used a puppet of an alien to chase him, and it looks not good at all. And that scene, I was like, what? I was like, what am I watching? Because it just didn't match tonally with the rest of the film as well. The film has a lot of interesting themes in it that honestly correlate more to the ones that are in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. A lot about religion, to be honest. But yeah, the first half's pretty good, but then the second half dips quite a bit. And now that I'm thinking about it, Dan, you might know the guy's name. I can't think of the top of my head, but I just watched Mank for the first time. Told you guys before I jumped on the podcast, and the same guy who is in Game of Thrones is in Alien 3 and also Mank, the Lannister, the dad.
Yeah, Charles Dance.
Yeah, I forgot that he's in Alien 3, and I just remembered it now that he's both in Alien 3 and in Mank. So that's kind of cool for Fincher to use him twice. But yeah, those are my little bit of thoughts right there. But
Yeah, I love Charles Dance. I think he's awesome. He was like, I mean, I love seeing him in Mank, even though I don't love that movie. I think you mentioned a little bit about the problems with Alien 3. I think the attitude that a lot of people have towards the movie are kind of similar towards like the studios feel. I think like Fox, I had a lot of expectations after obviously the first two were massive successes, and I think they wanted to have a lot of very like fine control over the direction of this movie, and how like they knew exactly what they wanted it to look like. But I think when you're bringing in a director like David Fincher, who obviously has like his own very particular style, and he's very um, technically proficient, but also like unique, and he also likes things done in a certain way. I think the amount of like takes he likes to do ended up with like a lot of budget problems on the movie. I think things from the timeline perspective got really skewed really quickly. They couldn't, I mean, even from the script, like they couldn't even nail down the script how they wanted it to be. There were so many rewrites. And then afterwards, there were so many reshoots. Like it just feels so like the movie itself feels so disjointed, and you can see like at every step of the process, um, you see that reflected, and you kind of it's easy to see why it ended up the way it was. So I think it's a shame, um, and I feel like maybe if they had gone with the director, I just don't think maybe he was the right choice, and not that's not his fault. That more so reflects on the studio, because if they just want a yes man, like don't bring in David Fincher. You know, that's kind of how I feel about it.
yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the modern Marvel movies, how they would, take an indie director and put him in a giant project. And that's very strange because they're not used to directing big action. And just thinking of the rest of Fincher's filmography, an Alien movie does not match that at all. And it's funny what you said though, that the fact that the studio, had the reins of the production. We'll get into it later, but then that makes me think of why he probably likes Netflix so much. Is the fact that they don't do that and just let him do whatever he wants, But
Yeah, and I think you're talking about Marvel. I think it's kind of the same thing Marvel runs into a lot, where like people they also take directors now and like Marvel directors don't, not that they don't do anything, but they're not directing the movie. Like Kevin Feige is saying, this is what this is going to. Kevin Feige should be fired. Kevin Feige should not have a job. Like that dude should have been fired a while ago. And this whole endeavor is like clearly way too much for him to manage. Like they had the right idea when they were splitting up the MCU into different segments, and it was like, okay, James Gunn is going to head up the like cosmic arena, and like he can manage those movies, and you could have 5, 6 different subsets of the property that there's a different creative vision, and there's like someone who knows that style is able to execute multiple films in that style. Now you just have had one person dictating all types of different projects that should be different stylistically, and they're just painting it with one broad brush. Like it's way too much on his plate, and he's not doing a good job. But like, not to get into Marvel, but it's a similar where this at the top they know how they want something to be, and the directors like Nia DaCosta, like she didn't direct the Marvels, like, and then they try to put that on her, like that the movie did bad. Like it's such a joke because she didn't direct that movie really, and she's a good director, so it's just like it's classic studio bullshit, I think. And this is like a prime example with Fincher.
Dude, the MCU should have ended after Endgame. I stand by that.
Yeah, I mean, at the very like, they could have just completely rebooted or just like restarted or like given it some time. Like it just trying to keep it rolling in the way they did was just a mistake. But you know, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah. So long story short, I think this is a great kind of cautionary tale about like studio interference and how it's better to just, you know, they could have just let Fincher do his thing and he probably would have made a pretty good movie. You know, it might not have been exactly what they wanted it to be, but it would have been better than what they got. So that's how I feel about it.
So I probably shouldn't admit this online, but I also haven't seen Aliens.
You got to get on that, sir.
You can
I
admit
know, dude.
that.
That's
I mean,
like been top of my watch list for a while.
I mean, there's tons of movies that I haven't watched. So I mean, there's nothing. I mean, that's you know, props to you for actually saying that. It's good. It's very different than Alien, which is incredible that you can switch so tonally and have the same you know, story, but both films are extremely excellent, which is really really cool to see because I feel like nowadays time, if they had a horror movie and all of a sudden it became like an action movie, people would not love that at all. But it's cool that they were able to do it with such, you know, two big, huge, iconic directors. But
I will
Yeah,
also say,
absolutely.
I think Aliens 3 feels a lot more in tone like the original than Aliens.
Okay.
Which, you know, it's more kind of like horror oriented and less like action blockbuster. Which, you know, I like in concept, but I don't think the execution was necessarily there.
wait, Connor, you don't even know what probably what Alien 3 is about, do you?
No.
Oh, uh, I mean, I'll tell you really quick what it like if I can explain it. But basically, Ripley just lands on a planet that is that has a not fortress, but has a facility in place where it is men. They're all men, and it's just her. And basically, all these men are prisoners and like really corrupt men who did awful things. I think a lot of times with women as well. And basically, there's an alien there, and he wreaks havoc. But they like have a brotherly bond, like religious thing going on as well. And it's very interesting because you know there's a certain gentleman who leads the entire group when it comes to this religious aspect, and it's interesting because he's not a good guy, but he's trying to change. So it's very very interesting the setting of the movie. I would say I really like that, but then like I said, just at the end it kind of just goes off the rails for me. But it's pretty interesting concept.
Have you read the synopsis of it on Letterboxd? The first line is "The bitch is back."
Really?
I think Sigourney Weaver like is still awesome. I mean, um, I think her character is still really cool. Also, Stone, in relation to what you were just talking about in terms of like the themes of the movie and whatnot, I think it is interesting how like Fincher is so hyper focused on like human nature, and good and evil and all that. And I think like you do see that present here. So like he does kind of leave his stamp on it, in that way.
I actually did a detailed review, um, and I think there was a. Let me see here. Sigourney Weaver wasn't a part of the story until the studio demanded that she be. And after being nominated for Best Actress in Aliens, Weaver actually had a lot of power in the making of the movie. One specific example is the fact that she doesn't like guns. So in this film, there are no guns to be found for almost the entire runtime. So she had a big say in what happened because she was hot stuff kind of now.
Yeah,
So what
that
you're
is
saying is this
interesting.
movie garbage because of her?
Well, I
No, but
I think anytime you have kind of too many minds involved in the creative process in a movie, it can struggle regardless of like the quality of the ideas from each of those minds. Like it's just I think a lot of times it's better to just have one distinct creative vision and allow that to like push something forward. Even though other people might have good ideas, like they're all normally kind of half baked and it's not always going to flow properly into, you know, one cohesive story. I think it's better to just let someone take over and just dominate in terms of, direction and whatnot. But that's just how I feel about it.
All right. Did you guys want to talk about the Rick Springfield at all? That Fincher directed?
I don't know a thing about it. But if you want to talk about it,
Yeah, what do
I,
you want
I
to
haven't
talk
seen it. I was just skipping over that since we're going in like his timeline order of direction.
about? Okay. Yeah, I think we just
Okay.
stick to the main films.
That was what I was thinking too. I was going to skip Love, Death, Robots as well.
Okay.
fun fact about that: that is the only Love, Death, and Robots episode that I've watched because I heard it was really good, and this was years ago, and I had no idea that Fincher directed it. Not a single clue. And something I also noticed too, I was looking it up on Letterboxd, was that the lead actor from it, because it's animated, obviously, is the same guy who did the motion capture work for Joel in the Last of Us video games, Troy Baker.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
so
has
I thought
done
that
a
was pretty
lot of
interesting.
stuff with Batman. All right. Well,
Fincher?
anyway, so moving on. Fincher's next film. What was that?
You think Fincher's done a lot of stuff with that, man?
No. Tony. What was it?
Oh, okay.
Baker. Tony Baker's done a
Gotcha.
lot with Batman.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So moving on to Fincher's next film was Seven.
Yeah, Seven is. I mean, I think Seven's one of the more probably beloved and iconic movies he has to offer. Obviously, um, I think I've always been somewhat lukewarm on it. Not that I think it's poor or anything by any means. I think that third act is really, really obviously good. There's a great twist. I think I, in general, have not as much love for movies that kind of rely on a twist. I think I like rewatchability, and I think I like stories that can, have that impact without the necessity of having that kind of um, action going on. So I think it's just not as strong for me for the large majority of the film. I think a lot of what happens in the first two thirds is like pretty forgettable. Like I like the concept of, like this, the way they weave in the seven deadly sins and, all the investigation. But to me, there's just not too much going on. And I think it feels like almost a way less interesting Zodiac for a lot of it. Um, and I think Zodiac connects more for me because it was real. And and I think the performances are better too. But yeah, how do you guys feel about Seven in general?
I really enjoyed Seven. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, probably. I think I've only watched it like 2 or 3 times, but I think that's one of the things I like about Fincher is I really enjoy twist endings. So I think that's where I differ from you, which I also think Fincher's way of capturing you, for a lot of his movies, where you just have to keep guessing for almost the whole time, is what I really like. It's but I mean, I like the whole Seven Deadly Sins. I actually think the acting is pretty good in this. Besides maybe, is it Cameron Diaz? Am I right? No, Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm just never a big fan of her, really, in a lot.
She's a legit weirdo as well in real life. So
Really?
oh yeah, look into Goop, man. Her
Yeah, she sells
lifestyle.
some interesting products, I've heard.
She's a snake oil salesman. She's a snake oil salesman. She just sells bullshit,
Hell yeah.
and lies about it. So I'm not a big Gwyneth Paltrow fan, but yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, if they could have recast her, I think this could have been a lot better. Stone, your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I don't care about Gwyneth Paltrow because she doesn't have that big of a role. You know, she's kind of there, but it's mostly just Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. I watched this for the first time. So you can say you've never watched Aliens. I didn't watch a lot of these films for the first time. Yeah, Seven. I watched it for the first time this past month, and one thing I did like about it is that it kind of just you don't have any room, there's no breathing available. Like as soon as the movie starts, it's going. You're automatically on a case. It's not necessarily the Seven Deadly Sins case, but you're all of a sudden right into a killing with Morgan Freeman. I like how quickly it started. I think there's the joke. I don't know if it's in David Fincher's movies, but I think there's a joke that he always it's always raining all the time, or something like that. And for a while, this city is unnamed the entire time. Like, oh, this corrupt city, Seven Deadly Sins going on. And for a long time, I wanted to make a joke that this was actually Lucius Fox. This is what he did, and this is Gotham, and that's why it's so corrupt and everything. But one thing I didn't like was that I did like the movie. I think it's very solid movie. I loved the Seven Deadly Sins aspect of it, and I'll tell you what, that one guy thought he was dead. The guy who was being starved and chained to the bed.
Mhm.
Big jump scare. Did not think he was going to pop up. Yeah, that got me really good. But I was so interested in the sins, and then I feel like they kind of the first, second, and third one, and then it kind of just died down and didn't really care about. I can't really remember, the situations of the killings for the fourth and the fifth one. I remember it's at a strip club or something like that. But I was very interested in that, and I was disappointed that they weren't focused on as much because I found that truly fascinating. Like the first one, they spent so much time on that, and even the second one. And I feel like when you don't spend that time on it again, it kind of loses the mystery aspect of the story because you're trying to help them solve the mystery with it, which is why Zodiac is so much more engaging for me. Because you truly feel like, because they have no idea what's going on and they're constantly trying to solve it, you feel like you're right there with them. Like you're trying to look for clues as it's going on. And I don't like that it kind of got away from that. And I will say this, the only thing I knew about this movie was the line, "What's in the box?" And if you know that line, then it ruins the movie for you. Because it wasn't a twist. I was like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen at the end. As soon as we were in the last 30 minutes of it. But yeah, really solid movie. I think Brad and Morgan do a great job in it. Like I said, Gwyneth Paltrow, she's fine. She doesn't have that big of a role, but huge step up from Alien 3 though. This is a classic movie, and that's super impressive for Fincher's filmography to have his second movie be that. I mean, that's truly astonishing, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think kind of we were talking about with the sins and whatnot. It kind of not falls apart at the end, but I think the sixth and seventh sin are his own, like Kevin Spacey's own sins, which to me it doesn't really fit because the sixth sin, someone else is suffering, someone else is losing their life, because of his sin, that does not make sense. That's
Yeah,
not
I got confused at the end with that.
so. Like for example, with the very first sin is gluttony, and it's an obese man, obviously hitting the nail on the head. But the sixth murder is envy, and it's Kevin Spacey's envy of Brad Pitt's life, and he kills his wife. So
Yeah.
it's not the same, and I understand it. It's fine, but it just seems like very convoluted from the mind of the killer. And granted, this person's obviously not going to be well balanced and you know all there mentally, but I think that doesn't lose me a little bit. It doesn't lose me fully, but I'm just kind of like, okay, like this is convenient.
Yeah, I had the same thought because his whole thing is like everyone that I'm killing, there's a reason why I'm killing them. They're not good people. And that didn't make sense because he's more doing it to Brad Pitt because Brad Pitt is not a good person, but he kills Gwyneth Paltrow, which she's fine. So yeah, I had an issue with that as well. Yeah, I didn't think that landed as well for me as it did for other people. I was a little I don't like that too much, but
Yeah, and then I think. Sorry, Connor, go ahead.
I was gonna say it almost feels like this movie could maybe benefit from being 20 minutes longer, maybe. And then he could have changed up that sixth sin, like killing, and then, like Stone was saying, like he could also, spend more time with each killing, so it'd go a little more in depth.
Yeah, because the finale makes sense in its own way. Like but the seventh murder is also built off the back of the sixth. So the seventh being pride, and it's his own pride, but that only exists because of his actions in the sixth murder. So it's like I don't know. But again, it's a super difficult story to like tie together. There's a lot going on. It's really complex. Like, it's really impressive. But yeah, for me, this is kind of in the middle of his work. It's good, but not anywhere near his best, in my opinion.
I will say one thing that makes me frustrated is I was trying to look it up on Letterboxd, and I hate when movies do this. But the fact that you can't look up 7, you have to put the 7 in between.
Yeah,
hate films. It just hate it, but I get why. There's
Letterboxd
actually
is great.
like a lot of movies. There's like a lot of movies that are named 7, so I guess it's a little bit different in that way, being named that. But
Letterboxd is great, but its search engine is awful.
I also think one other note, I would love to have seen Fincher make this like 10 years later. And like 10 years deeper into his career, I think it could have been even better. And I think with some more work under his belt and, the movies he makes when he really gets into his own and is really like dialed in, I think this just could have been something even better. And I would have been interested to see it later on. But like you said, this is coming after Alien 3, so it's a huge step up from that. And he's a young director at this point, so it's still super impressive.
I'm pretty sure this movie's in IMDb's top 250.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and I mean, most people would not argue that. So
yeah, and to hit that list on your second film ever, pretty impressive.
yeah, and I love Morgan Freeman. I think he's really, really good here too. He's probably my favorite part of the movie, outside of like the general atmosphere that he builds.
did you see that recent clip of him that went viral?
From what?
Basically, it was just no one's seen Morgan Freeman in a while. He's just chilling. He doesn't really act anymore that much, and someone just videotaped him getting in his car, and he looks old. And they're like,
I did see that.
"Oh, he looks old." I'm like, he's fucking 86. Of course he looks old. Like, chill out. Just let him get in his car.
Crazy how that happens.
Yeah, aging is wild. He's in fact not Benjamin Button, but I think one thing with him is he looked so. I feel like he looked the same basically for so long. Everyone maybe in their mind was just like, "Oh, he's not even aging." But like, and if you watch his older movies, there's kind of a large chunk of time where he looks relatively similar. And he's aged great. I mean, I think he looks awesome for his age. So
I mean, hell, even his boot camp picture, he almost looks the same.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like weird. He looked older. Like he looked like he was 50 when he was probably like 35. But then he looked 50 when he was like 75.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly.
good for him.
You guys have any other thoughts on Seven here?
I think I'm all done. What do you think of Spacey as the villain? Which is kind of Spacey's role, but like I feel like this
He's
is one of his more like standout villain roles.
he's Kevin Spacey. He
Yeah.
does
I
his thing.
think he did. Yeah, he did a good job. He's a good actor. I mean, putting aside his, what's happened in his life, he's a really good actor, and I think he does a good job. He
When
is
I watched American,
he's very memorable, and that's really impressive when he's only in the film for like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
yeah,
I feel like this is right in his wheelhouse. Like I don't think he's doing anything. Like I feel like it's like watching. This is just off the top of my head, but it's like watching Barry Keoghan in Saltburn. It's like he's not doing anything we haven't seen Barry Keoghan do. Like it's not like, oh my god, it's just like right in his wheelhouse. So yeah, it's good.
well, no, I feel like American Beauty was right in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, he's an absolute weirdo scumbag piece of shit. But
Yeah, that
um,
movie aged like sour milk.
yeah, I never really enjoyed that movie very much. But especially now, I'm just like even more out on it. But
I mean, like
yeah,
it was a decent movie, but I don't get why it's in like everyone's like top 100 movies of all time.
no, I should actually make a video about that. I feel like, but he's acting again and stuff, which is interesting.
He was found not guilty, which
Yeah, after a witness was murdered.
yeah,
But
that's one.
funny how that goes. But anyway, what's next in terms of time?
We got The Game, 1997.
I really like the game, and this is one that has steadily moved up for me the more I've watched it. I think it's really funny. Like I think it's a great kind of like dark comedy. And I think that's kind of my favorite thing about it. And it's very unique. Like I think it really stands out in a way from a lot of what he's done. Um, and I think Michael Douglas is excellent. So I really like this movie. How do you feel, Stone?
Um, it's all right. In my opinion, it's thinking back on it because I watched it for the first time in November. There's just the most interesting part about it is the game and what's going on, and all the actors and everything like that. But when I think back on it, there's not maybe a single scene that sticks out to me really. Michael Douglas does, but then I don't get the ending per se. I don't understand. I don't like the fact that they wanted him to commit suicide. And they're like, see, buddy, like, you know, I don't know. It changed his life around because he tried to commit suicide and his family did that to him. It's very I mean, I guess it is a dark comedy, like you said, but like I said, it's good. It's like solid, but there was nothing to it that kind of stood out to me besides the actual concept of the movie itself. But I think it's very solid. It's not at the level of Seven. There's a lot more memorable scenes in Seven. I mean, then I guess that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's a solid movie, but it's not one of my favorites of his.
Yeah, I I think the ending is pretty memorable. Like I think that scene is excellent, and I think he's someone that has he's so selfish and so just wrapped up in himself, and like it's I mean I think a lot of it is really funny just how much of an asshole he is and just like completely in his own world. And I think the one of the funniest things about it is his like you see his narcissism on display throughout the movie, how he thinks every little thing that happens, he's like, oh, it's the game. Like it's about me. Like I think that little subtlety is so funny. And just, sometimes he might be right, but other people are just like, what are you talking about? Like I'm just like going about my life. It's not about you. It had nothing to do with you. Um, and I think, yeah, I find that very funny in terms of just like how out of touch some people can be. Um, and then kind of like why he's like that I like it going into his backstory, with his father, and like you kind of see like how he becomes the person he is, and then also how his brother becomes the person he is. Um, and yeah, I think it's really really interesting. I feel like it genuinely keeps you guessing pretty well. Um, I think a lot of stuff like this feels pretty predictable, and I don't think this does. It takes a lot of twists and turns that are like genuine, and the quality doesn't fall apart as a result of them. So I really like this one, probably more than most people, I think.
I will say at the end it got me. Like I could not. I was like, "Is it over? Or are we still going?" Like at the end they were getting me pretty good. But one thing I didn't like is that at the end it's like 5 minutes after everything's all over, and he's like, "Ah, you want to go on a date?" and like stuff like that. I'm like, "Dude, your life has been fucked over like for months now, and you're just like, just played a little prank on me. I love life now." It's like he changed his. You would be traumatized if that really happened to you. I don't know if it's because of the character and who he is that he's not, but I thought he was very, he was like, they're just my family, kind of too easily.
I would say, as a counterpoint to that, I think one thing it showed him was this is someone that probably has lacked any type of genuine connection for a large portion of their life and has been such a narcissist, just piece of shit that they probably haven't even really looked for that. And I think he had a moment of like realizing like I might have actually connected with this person through this ridiculous series of events. And I think it's kind of like a light bulb clicked in his head, like, you know, that meant something to me. And, you know, I think he just kind of saw that in that moment that like that she might just be gone forever. So like I don't think that was that unbelievable just because I think it might have felt like something different or fresh for him.
Yeah,
If
I
that
think
makes
this might get better on rewatch because I think I was just so maybe fascinated with what was going on that I missed parts of his character, and stuff like that. But Connor, is this one of the ones you haven't watched?
Yeah, I haven't seen this one yet. Honestly, when we
Um,
get off of here and I'm editing this, I might throw that on and watch it, or just watch it tonight. Depends on how good the Monday Night Football game is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wanted to bring it up on here. Love y'all, but terrible time to have a David Fincher uh, ranking or podcast because none of these are on like any streaming services right now. I think I
Hey,
watched the game. I think I watched the game on like
Tubi?
Fubo.
Yeah, I think it's Tubi, but it might have been Fubo. Or, yeah, it's the free one with ads.
Yeah, and I think I
Hey,
watched seven. I watched seven on Pluto TV, and then
Yeah,
I
hey,
bought
we
like
got the
four.
killer
I
on
didn't buy,
Netflix.
but
We got the
yeah,
killer on Netflix. The Social Network on Netflix. I think Fight
man.
Club's on Prime, maybe.
I had to rent Fight Club, so it might be on Prime now. But I had to rent Fight Club. I had to
Let me
rent
check.
Fight Club,
No, it's
um, Panic Room, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Um, Maybe that was it, but yeah, but
If I could say
yeah.
one
I
more
rent.
thing,
No,
just one more thing quickly about the game. I think, and kind of just for you too, like watching it, it does feel like a little bit long. Like there are parts that I think I feel a little repetitive, and I was like, okay, we get it. Um, like keep it moving. Like I think it felt like it dragged out a little bit at parts. I still like it a lot, but I think if I could change one thing, it would be the pacing.
I think that is the danger with any Fincher film, though, is they are almost all 3 hours long, or a lot of them are. I shouldn't say almost all, but
He
I mean,
he he. I think sometimes gets caught up in the story and caught up in what he's doing, and just like wants to add in small sections to like reinforce different things. And some movies I think are definitely guilty of it, more guilty of it than others. But there's probably only one that's over 2.5 hours that I wouldn't shorten. So he
I
definitely he
think
definitely can get a little long.
I love the killer more than I think about it, but that is one thing about the killer that he did well. I don't think it's too long. I think it ends perfectly. It's only like an hour and 45 minutes. I think. I don't think it's long at all.
Yeah, the killer is really it's kind of its own beast, I think, for him. I'm looking forward to talking about that. But
yeah.
yeah, this one goes a little long, and like that holds me back from like really putting this like near the top of my list, honestly.
Yeah, I want to shout it out. I talked about Dan, or I talked to Dan about this, but have you ever watched Connor the show Jury Duty?
No.
Very similar to the game, and it's a very good show on Amazon Prime. You should check it out. It was nominated for best TV show at the Emmys. That's gonna hand out awards this year. But basically, this guy just goes to a jury. He signs up. It's a jury documentary, and he knows this that cameras are going to be on him, and he's just going to see a case. But every single person that he comes into contact with for 2 weeks is an actor, and
Okay.
they're purposely making the show or the jury in the case very weird, and the people who are on the jury very weird. And they do this thing. Actor James Marsden, is a producer on the show. So what they do is James Marsden is part of the jury, and he plays himself, which is very funny. And what they do is they fake a paparazzi coming to take a picture of James Marsden. So because of that, they do something which is real, I believe, is they isolate the jury. That way, there's no outer influence on the case. So that's why they're able to get this real life man in this situation, isolating by himself with these jury members who are all actors who he thinks are real people. And it's very filmed similarly to The Office. Like everyone's doing interviews kind of thing. And the thing that's incredible is the guy is such a nice man. They purposely did things to try to annoy him, and he's such a nice human being. And Amazon actually came out maybe a week ago, made him a deal, like a TV, and he might be more TV shows and films and everything. And they want to partner with this guy who's a normal person who they did all this to. It's a fantastic show. I don't watch shows, but it was it. You can't like stop watching it. It's incredible. But
Okay.
it's
Okay.
very similar to the game with all actors and everything like that. It's very similar, which is why I brought it up. But
I suck at watching TV shows. Like I've still never seen an episode of Game of Thrones, The Sopranos. I've never finished Breaking Bad. Like,
it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, starting Breaking Bad and not finishing it is wild behavior.
I've tried 3 times.
Um, one last thing, and again, not to like, I literally just watched Saltburn yesterday, so I think I'm just thinking about like rich people and stuff. But one thing that kind of ties with the game, I think one of the best things Saltburn did was just like highlight the boredom of obscene wealth sometimes. And I think another interesting part of this is like he's just so damn bored because a lot of the things, a lot of people would be like, why would he agree to this? You don't know what you're doing. Like he just wants something to like happen in his life. He's just like, why not? Like, and I think, we might think of someone who has everything as like, they're just loving life. It's great. But like, he's so lonely. Like his house is huge. He's just like there by himself. Like his existence is so pathetic. And like, he just wants something, even if it's something awful to like, uh, spice things up.
It sounds like Batman's origin story.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny comparison, but it is like he is similar-ish to like a Bruce Wayne type, I guess, in the loneliness and like wealth. But Bruce, I guess, chooses to, you know, put his time towards like helping other people rather than just existing in like vapidness. So
Yeah.
yeah, um, that's another thing I like about the movie, just like highlighting that boredom. I think is funny.
All right. Well, next up we have probably his most iconic movie with Fight Club.
Someone else can start on this.
Oh, it sounds like Dan doesn't like Fight Club.
I don't know. I think I watched because supposedly there's people out there who really like Dan's ranking. I've heard. I think you had it like 4. So who knows? It could be at number 1 now, or it could be at number 8. Um, it's so funny because I went into Fight Club. This was my second time I watched it. So I haven't watched it in a really long time. Watched it again last month, and I went into the film not like everyone loves it. That's the thing. A lot of people do, right? And I went into the film not. I don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, it's really good, but I do really like it a lot, and I think it's very similar to the reason why I love another movie of his that comes out. We'll talk about it later. The Social Network is because I think every aspect of the movie is the same tonally. Like I think the music in Social Network works with the cinematography and the actors and everything like that works perfectly. I think that's very similar to Fight Club. The way the actors are performing, the way the cinematography is, the way the music is, where it's the setting, everything is working very perfectly together, and the story is extremely interesting. People, I know there's a lot of people who take the wrong message out of this story, which is pretty hilarious. But I want to say one thing too that matches the tone of the movie, where I think it doesn't in another David Fincher movie, is there's this thing he does, and I watched Panic Room recently, where he kind of does these shots where it's all CGI, and like the camera is like zooming, and like in Panic Room he like does these shots where it's like the floor is see through and you can see what's going on. And for Panic Room that really didn't work, but he does very similar things in Fight Club, and it really works in Fight Club, I think, and matches the entire feel of the movie. But I really liked Fight Club a lot. I think it's a very good movie. I don't know about rewatches though. That's the only thing with movies like this with giant twist endings. Is it still as good on rewatch kind of thing? So, but what do you guys think?
I'm a big fan of Fight Club, but I also am under the impression I think it's one of the most like overhyped movies of all time with a very strange cult following. Like I really enjoy the movie for what it is, and I enjoy a lot of the quotes out of it. The acting, like you said, the music matches perfectly, in my opinion. It also gives us the greatest actor to step foot into Hollywood, Jared Leto.
Stop it. I'm not taking the bait.
I'll get you one of these times.
Yeah. Jared Leto's he's great in Panic Room. I really enjoyed his arc there. It's a good arc.
Well, that was my review of Panic Room. Is the fact that it's very hilarious that David Fincher abuses Jared Leto in both of the films that he appears in. It's very funny.
Yeah. David Fincher was onto something, I think.
No, but I don't know. Like I said, I really like Fight Club, and it's towards the top of my rankings. But like, part of me doesn't want it to be as high as it is, just because of the cult following this movie has. Like, fans of this movie swear it's the greatest thing to touch cinema ever, and I mean, I forget what I rated it, but I have it 4 out of 5 stars because I don't know if I've given it on my 10-point scale yet. I don't think it's a 5 out of 5 movie or anywhere close.
Yeah. Stone, something funny. You're sitting outside of Starbucks. Fincher put Starbucks cups all around, like they're in a lot of different shots as like a little subtle jab at like consumerism and just like I guess kind of the grind set lifestyle. I think that's a funny touch, but and the logo itself is like in the background of like almost every scene, I think, somewhere. So that's kind of a funny little thing he did. But yeah, I think every time I watch Fight Club, I am wondering what I'm supposed to take away. Because I think it presents you with two sides of a coin, and they're both awful. But I think that is also very much David Fincher's view on humanity. I don't think he likes people. I don't think he likes people at all. I think he thinks people are terrible. I think he likes talking about people at their most base, whether that be like violence or some kind of like depraved sexuality or like just treating each other poorly. I think that's where he likes to live, and that's where he does his best work. And to me, this is kind of like, you know, on one hand, you have Edward Norton and everyone else like him, who he just presents as like, you know, kind of a sheep, and not super masculine, focused on their appearance and how like they look to the other people around them. Similar to, I feel like it's similar to American Psycho in that it's just so concerned with appearance. Obviously, that's more like yuppie New York City, like uppity culture, but like it's the same thing, just on a different economic class. But just like wanting to have this and that, so like your neighbor thinks you're, you know, you're doing well, whatever. Like just all about appearance. But in reality, you're just kind of like going through existence and doing nothing until you die. But then he kind of puts out the opposite of this as Tyler Durden, which is like hyper masculine, doing whatever you want, saying whatever you want, being with, you know, whoever you want to be with, like just doing everything like that your most base self would want to do. But what's ironic, I guess, is that the people that follow him are just as much sheep as Edward Norton's character, and you're no different. So if neither of those things are good, and in reality, what's worse is Durden, because he's ultimately committing terrorism and like brainwashing people. So what again are we supposed to be taking away in terms of how to live or how to be? And I don't think Fincher really necessarily has an answer to that. I don't think the movie has to answer that, but it's just kind of a very dark outlook on, I guess, being a man. Because I think there's a middle ground there that the movie kind of ignores. So,
Well, not nearly as dark, but it's kind of the same with Wolf of Wall Street. You know, like people, want to be like that guy, even though he's a real piece of shit.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, it's every 14-year-old's Sigma male edit on TikTok with fucking The Wolf of Wall Street and American Psycho and Fight Club and Achilles and like all these just like massively flawed characters that are like basically satirical.
I mean,
And
hell,
it's like,
even Iron Man or Tony Stark as a character, like you could say the same, except he actually had a good ending. Like
yeah,
so
because
he is the one
that character
exception.
with an arc. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like,
And
I
I
don't
think
Yeah, I
even
that's
get
know
what,
if
frustrating. Like in terms
that's a
of
good point. It's a good point. I mean, I have it at 5 out of 5 stars just because it's more. I get what you're saying though, because that like kind of changes my opinion a little bit because there's like two big messages going on. He kind of doesn't decide what he wants to highlight. They're kind of just both there,
yeah,
you know.
it's just like consumerism sheep and then
Yeah,
like nihilistic fascist sheep. And
yeah.
like I don't know.
I guess why I love it so much is just because that I think the entire filmmaking itself is incredible, and that might be the one part of the entire movie that I think just because you can say, hey, it's open for your own interpretation, what you want to take
Which is
out of it, but
exactly
then
what it is. Yes. Yes.
right, but I know that Fincher, I believe, has come out and that whole angle of people saying, down with consumerism and all this stuff. He's like, no, that's not the message because he doesn't want people to take that out of this. I believe he's come out and said, I don't know why, that's not the point of the story, but you don't say that in the film, so it's not surprising that people take that out of it.
Yeah, and the thing is the danger in making characters like Tyler Durden, and this is my problem with The Clockwork Orange. Like this is my problem with a lot of movies, is like when the best parts of those movies are the technical aspects and the shots and the memorable, like the way you shoot characters. Like you can glorify them without saying that. Like you can glorify them through the way you shoot them, and like subconsciously, and just the fact that you're casting, Brad Pitt at 4.5% body fat, looking like a mod, like just having him playing this character, like you are glorifying something about him, and you're making him like an idealistic character, even if you're not saying like that's the intention. So I think there's a danger there, uh, and you have to be careful as a director with the decisions you try to decide to make artistically because they can contradict the messaging of the movie. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
I know Matt Damon was in talks to either be Tyler or what's his name? I think they've come out and said that his name's Jack.
Oh,
I
really?
think I think that is a thing that his name is actually Jack. I remember doing that in my research, but I know that Edward Norton and Matt Damon were up for a lot of the same roles, I believe. And I think Edward Norton was in the running for getting the talented Mr. Ripley. And that went to Damon. So Norton did this instead. And Norton I haven't seen a lot of films with Norton in it, but he's a phenomenal actor in whatever I see him in. But I know that he's also, especially with this film, I know he's very difficult on set and he likes to take charge of things a lot. Um, but yeah, I think Matt Damon was in the running, but I think they're both pretty perfectly casted, to be honest. Because Tyler Durden's such a glorified character, and you want to be like Tyler Durden. All right, this is even though Fincher says That's not the point of the story, but I mean, you casted like the hottest actor in Hollywood, and all the guys want to be like Brad Pitt in this movie. That's on purpose. And then I don't think Matt Damon would have worked for Edward Norton's part because he's supposed to be, a little scrawny guy. Nobody wants to be Edward Norton. And I think he fits that really well. Best scene in the film by far to me is the scene where he's beating himself up. Perfect. That's my favorite scene in the whole movie, I would say, the office scene. But one interesting fact I found out about the movie is there's a very iconic line where I believe what do you think about Helen? I forgot her middle name.
Helena Bonham Carter.
How do you like her in this movie? Do you think she fits it?
I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think David Fincher's general relationship with women in his movies is very interesting, and like that could be a video, or that could be a podcast episode of its own, because there's a lot to break down there. But I think she's perfect. I mean, she's one of the best actresses of our generation. I actually normally just say one of the best actors of our generation. And I think
she fits the feel of the movie really well.
Yeah,
like I said, I think she's perfectly casted too for like this edginess, this tone that is in the entire movie. You might know the line better than me. What's the line she says about 8th grade and pregnancy?
Oh.
Yeah, they changed that, didn't they?
So I can't remember what it is. It's like, this is the best sex I've had since 8th grade is maybe what she says.
Yeah, I think it was originally supposed to be something related to abortion.
Yeah. So what happened is he gave the script, I think, to the company or whoever made the film, and it said the line originally said, "I want to have your next abortion. I want you to make my next abortion," or something like that.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that, and they said, "Fincher, you got to take that out." And he was like, "Okay, cool, but whatever I replace it with, it has to be fine." And they're like, "All right, cool." So that's what he replaced the line with. Yeah. So pretty interesting there. That was funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I think she's excellent.
And then Meatloaf. I never listened to Meatloaf, but I know he's the guy with the big old tits.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very strange, like, I also think a lot of the second half I feel like isn't as good. Like, I feel like once he's kind of involved in like the true cultiness of it and you kind of see like what it's actually about, I'm kind of just like, okay, like waiting for it to end. Obviously the ending is iconic, but yeah, I think there's periods of this where I'm kind of just like not that invested.
One thing that always annoys me about the end is how he shoots himself in the mouth, and then he's up and talking like 2 minutes later. Like,
you can get shot in the face and just kind of eat it. Honestly,
that's
people
quite literally
survive
what he did.
crazy-
Actually, was eat it.
It happens. Like, people survive crazy shit.
No, and I'm not saying he should die from that, but the fact that he's up and just having full conversations like normal, like 30 seconds, like that's the part that bothers me.
I think there's a lot of suspension of disbelief and like surrealism in the movie, which like you just kind of have to go with. But I hear what you're saying.
One thing I find interesting, and it's funny that they didn't show it very often, is the funny scene that, if you think about it, really is hilarious, is the fact when he's beating himself up outside of the bar or whatever, and they only show that for a couple seconds because I don't feel like he would get a cult following him then just from beating himself up. I mean, these guys are like, "Oh, what's this guy on? Let me go approach him and see what he's doing." I'd be like, "That's a fucking weirdo. I gotta stay away from him." I mean, that's maybe men were different back then, but they don't show that very much because I feel like you can only do so much with that before it becomes very comical.
I definitely feel like all cult followings start from like a self-help guru that failed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a fitting movie for Jared Leto to be in, given all the cult connections. But also, David Fincher makes an appearance in this movie, which is funny. He's like a convenience store clerk. And he like sells Tyler Durden the gun when he goes. That's Fincher.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
I never picked up on that. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I've only seen this movie like a handful of times, but not even.
Yeah. I wanted to say this to you, Dan, but I know it's not about Fincher, but with your thoughts about Jared Leto, you'll really like that new film, May December, a lot, because it reminded me of him in certain aspects. So
yeah, Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to watching that. And I think maybe just one more thought on this is, uh, I think it's also another interesting kind of reflection on boredom as well. Like we just talked about with the game, but like I think people are there's a lot of people that just maybe are looking for like something in life, and we were just talking about like beating yourself up, like how is that interesting? But like maybe that's more interesting than just being nothing or doing nothing. Um, it makes me think of there was this experiment that was done, I think, relatively recently, where they had a bunch of people in a room, and basically they gave them the option to do nothing or hit a button that would electrocute them slightly. And a large percentage of people chose to electrocute themselves at over the stretch of doing nothing. And some people did it multiple times. And I
That'd
think
be
like I think about that like experiment a lot in relation to movies because I think like the idea of like people's just fear of boredom and fear of like just doing and being nothing is like so oppressive sometimes. So people might, someone beating themselves up might be more interesting than just kind of existing in your regular day to day after 15 years.
I've never gone that far, but if I was in a room with just a button and I knew it would electrocute me, I'd probably press it a few times.
I would press it.
Yeah. My ADHD brain would just be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing with wanting to. I mean, in college, I had my buddy bought a taser, and he just tased our roommate because it's like, what does it truly feel like? I want to I want to feel
Yeah.
something.
it is funny that like thinking about this movie though, like when I was in the Marine Corps and like if we had like nothing to do at work, we would just start wrestling, like
Yeah.
out of pure boredom.
Yeah. I think that's like very natural, just like human behavior. But I think like people like, again, Fincher loves just like looking at people. And again, I don't think he thinks very highly of them.
Especially women.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that argument could be made. But really anyone.
Amy Dunn's such a good person, though.
Yeah.
She's one of the best female antagonists of all time. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Rosamund Pike, man, like, again, I'm not going to mention Saltburn every movie we talk about David Fincher, but she was probably the best part of that movie for me. She's so
She's really good in it.
Yeah,
She's really attractive still too. I mean, that's been what? It's been 10 years since Gone Girl, and she really hasn't missed a beat.
she looks great. Yeah, she's incredible.
Hilarious in that movie.
Yeah. So, yeah, Fincher does not like humans very much, but it is what it is.
You might be able to
one
say
thing
the
I
same
wanna say real
about
quick.
Ari Aster.
Yeah. I was gonna say something that's cool that I feel like Fincher does that not a lot of directors do, and I think Fight Club fits into this mold. He really puts a lot of time into his title cards. Like,
Dude, yes.
yeah, I mean, The Killer had a really sick one, and then probably his best one, in my opinion, from all the ones I watched, is the opening sequence for Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is incredible.
Very Bond.
Yes, it's incredible to look at.
Yeah,
so
and
I think that's
the game too is like doing all that crazy stuff in the
Oh,
city
yeah.
and whatnot. Like, yeah, he is detail oriented to the max. Like, there's nothing phoned in, usually. So yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, I mean Fincher is still probably one of my favorite directors. I do like twist endings, like I mentioned earlier, but like Dan said, how much rewatchability does this give movies like of his? Because like one of the examples to where I think it's better is like Tarantino in Pulp Fiction. Like I know your thoughts on Pulp Fiction, but like The Briefcase, like it kind of keeps you wondering, and then just he leaves it up for speculation. So I mean, different ways to hold audiences' attention. Or Pulp Fiction, would probably hold any TikTok generation's attention.
Yeah, because it's constantly hitting you with like imagery, action, sharp dialogue. Like it's a modern movie from 95, whatever, 94, 6.
94.
I'm not in love with it as much as other people are, but that's very true. I watched that for the first time recently too, and I was like, why do I like this more? I'm supposed to say this is like a 15 out of 10 movie, but I will say though the dialogue is incredible. Tarantino's dialogue is always incredible. I feel like a lot of people forget the fact that he's always like, I'm gonna do 10 films and that's it. Is these films take so much time for him because he writes them all too and directs them, rather than other directors who are able just to bust them out. Scorsese, Fincher, they really don't write any of their films, where he has to take so much time and preparation with his. So no
Well,
wonder it takes so much out of him.
What's crazy too is he said he was writing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for like 16 years or something, just because like he would write some, put it aside for however long, think of something else to put in it, come back. Like
People like to bash on Quentin Tarantino because they think it's like cool or he's just like too mean. Like that's just so ridiculous. Like just shut up. Like he's so talented and like the stuff he's written is so good. And like the amount of work he's put in and the amount of time he's put into just like building an understanding of like the craft and like taking in movies from all around the world and like developing actual respect for like the history of filmmaking. Like he's a one in a million human being, and people are just like, oh, it's just like people just brush him aside. It's so whack. I think.
I mean, he's one of what like 3 directors ever to not have a miss in his filmography yet.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely like the term miss. Like Fincher definitely does,
Well, yeah, like you
and
guys were
like
saying, Alien 3 was like bad.
yeah, and I think like I mean to me, I mean we'll get into like ranking, but like Mank is just not it for me. And I think he would say the same thing himself. But anyway, yeah, like Tarantino, he's not just ever putting out bullshit. Like he's established a brand and he's making sure everything he makes is like fitting that brand and it's going to be like appealing to his fans. Like he cares about making stuff for his fan base. So I
I will
love
say
that.
I'm disappointed the fact of, and I'm not surprised, but what his last film is going to be about, The Film Critic. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm not surprised that he's making that because he's, it's if it is his last film, he's trying to run and get all the awards he can, and the Oscars just love movies about Hollywood and everything. But I hate the fact that he just did that and now he's doing it again.
I wish
But
it was.
I don't blame him.
I wish it was the Kill Bill 3 that idea that he
Yeah.
had. Like that could have been.
That'd be a great way to cap off his career too. I feel like.
Yeah. And I was reading that he kind of wanted that to be like his Fistful of Dollars trilogy, like for himself. And I kind of wish that had been a thing, but it's obviously not going to happen. But yeah, we're getting off track here
Yeah.
with Tarantino talk.
All right, back to you two. The next film on our list is Panic Room.
I can start, Stone. I like Panic Room a lot. I think it's very simple, and I like that. I think this is maybe one of his better female characters, even though she still like is flawed and you know, but she's flawed, I guess, in a way that most of the people he writes are, regardless of gender. But she still like is interesting to me. And she like takes control of the situation and like does a lot of stuff proactively that I think is really interesting. I like this feels like almost like a stage play. It's so contained. A lot of this quality of the movie rests on the back of the performances. There's not much else there. It's just in the home. I also think like the camera work here is so cool. Like I love it. Like I love I honestly
Do you
love
like
a
those
lot
see-through things? Like the see-through floors? You know what I'm saying? Like about his like CGI shots that he does
Yeah.
and everything like that?
I kind of like it. I think I also like a lot of this movie before they even enter, like before the home invaders even get in the house. I think the way they like create this house into this like almost like living, breathing thing, where it's like so like it's this like big empty space, and it's like all the shots moving around, like the way the camera's gliding around, and like you kind of take in just like all the emptiness. Um, And I think it's interesting, especially for a character that's like really struggling and going through a difficult period of time. I think it kind of puts you in her mind and like how alone, um, you know, like separation from your spouse can be, like something like that. Like that might be reaching, but like the feeling of loneliness, and then like, even her bed is just this tiny thing in the center of this like huge room, and like she's just there. Um, I think a lot of that stuff I really appreciate, and um, I like her performance. And like Forrest Whitaker is excellent usually.
He's the best part of that movie for me, even above Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart.
Yeah, and I like nuance a lot of the time. Like I like characters that aren't just because they could have made him just like another bad guy. It could have just been three Jared Letos or two Jared Letos. Like I love the juxtaposition of the different types of criminals. Like you have the legit psychopath, the third guy. You have the like kind of slimy in the middle, like might do something really out of pocket, but like is just really trying to get something easy guy in Jared Leto. And then you have the person who like is doing the wrong things, maybe for the right reasons, like genuinely doesn't want to hurt anyone, but like probably doesn't know what else to do. And I think looking at them, it kind of gives you like a slice of like three different types of criminals. I think that's really interesting. Like Fincher loves, I think, criminals and crime and like evil and like looking into that, like we keep talking about. And I like that you kind of get a sense of different types of that. I'm repeating myself, sorry, but uh, yeah, I think this is really cool. I think it keeps you on the edge of your seat. Um, and I like the whole like diabetic aspect with Kristen Stewart, like that gives like a sense of urgency to the plot in like a real believable way. I think it's well done. Like I think it's a lot better than many things that are like it. So yeah, I really like this one.
It's interesting because I say break down films really well and sway my opinion a lot. But when I first watched it, I think it's maybe in comparison to all of his other filmography, I just don't think there's anything really special about it. I feel like it is it's an invasion movie. He wanted to do that type of film, but the whole thing with the aspect of the criminals and everything like that. Are there better criminals in another home invasion movie that are better than these three guys? And the one thing that really frustrated me and that I couldn't overlook is there's points because they have cameras in there, right? There's points where the three dudes aren't next to them and they can leave if they want to, but they don't. They don't think of that. And then there's other points where they're like, oh, the three guys are not. They were like all downstairs at one point. And I was like, okay, you guys can get out if you want. And then a few moments later, they're like, oh, they're not here. Let's try to get out of this thing. So that was something that I kind of couldn't overlook. And maybe I'm not thinking of something because that doesn't really sound like something Fincher would do. But there was, with home invasion movies, right? You have to think of so many different scenarios that, can make it exciting because it is in one place. And the only things that I can really think of is the fact, I guess what makes it exciting is the fact that the three guys are so differently and they're kind of like tearing themselves apart. Right. But I mean, I think of the propane tank and then obviously the thing with the diabetes, which I like that rather than other movies with poor writing, they didn't ever say that she had diabetes. There's a scene where she opens the fridge and then you can see the insulin bottles there. And I thought that
Right
was
off the bat,
great.
right off the bat, I love that. Yeah, it's so easy. Like, and you don't have to be like, "Oh, how's your diabetes feeling today?" Like, it's just like,
Yeah, yeah.
but
That's
every movie now does shit like that. I'm just like, you can just
well,
the audience is not brain dead. Like, the
right.
audience can perceive things. The audience has eyes. Like, we are aware. Like, you don't have to lay everything out like so just blatantly. So yeah, I like stuff like that too.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Star Wars video I sent to you that you watched. The
Yeah,
fact that your audience has brains and you don't have to explain everything to them. But it's
yeah,
really funny because my wife has type 1 diabetes, so a lot of times in films with poor writing, they don't get the my blood sugar is going low, right? Or my blood sugar is low, I need my insulin, right? They would make that mistake. That's not what you do. And I don't know why I was like, oh, are they going to make a mistake here kind of thing? Because they show the insulin bottles and then they show insulin bottles and her blood sugar starts going low. And that's the only way they hint at anything of her having diabetes. So for some reason I thought, okay, and I knew her blood sugar was going low. Are they like, oh, we need to get to the fridge. But no, they do the smart thing. It's like you need to eat something kind of, or no, they actually have an injection of like probably glucose or something, a glucagon, something like that. But yeah, really, that was good that they. I mean, it's Fincher, so he's not gonna. It's gonna be a good writing in the film. But yeah, I thought it was fine. I don't think it did anything special, and I think that it's kind of terrible that I'm looking at it this way. But I think compared to his other films, this is just basic, and I don't really get anything out of it. And I really do like Jodie Foster too, and Kristen Stewart does a great job. But it's just compared to his other filmography, it's just fine. So
Yeah, and I think this is a definitely like, and for I mean, I'll give this away for reference. I have this at 8 out of 12. So like, it's not like groundbreaking, but I think it's better than a few other things he's done. And I appreciate it for exactly what it is. But I think if you stick this in the filmography of a lot of other people, you might be like, wow, this is some of the best work they've done, which is more of a testament to Fincher himself than um, a detraction from this movie. So yeah, but and yeah, I think really quickly I'll say in terms of what you were saying about why didn't they do this or that? I think there is a certain element of like the paralyzing fear of that situation, especially just when your child is there. You don't have a weapon, like you're just really on your own. I think there's a legitimate, and also like there's not really anywhere to go, like because they were controlling the whole ground floor.
yeah,
So I think there is a certain element of like paralysis that would probably take over most people, especially when you're concerned about your kid and not just on your own. But yeah, there's probably not much else to say about this, but I think it's good for what it is.
yeah. It's just, like you said, it's a simple movie. There's not much to say, which I
Yep.
wish there was more. But he just wanted to make this style of movie, so
Yep.
you can only do so much.
Yep. I'm with you.
All right. Well, next up we have Zodiac.
You want to start, Connor? We've been talking a lot.
Yeah, I can. What's funny, and this is a net tack on my knowledge. I started this movie and I was maybe 45 minutes in, and my wife walked into the room, and she's like, "Oh, you're watching the movie kind of about the Zodiac killer," and I didn't realize that's what I was watching, so I started it over.
Wait, so what did you think you were watching?
Dude, half of these movies I went into not knowing a thing about. Like, I had no idea what the girl with the dragon tattoo was about. Like, my wife.
I didn't either. That was. I love going into movies and not knowing a thing they're
Yeah.
about. Yeah, same thing.
Well, and I think I mentioned that to Dan on like our first episode ever together. That like I love not knowing a lot about movies. Like, I missed every single trailer for Across the Spider-Verse, so nothing would be spoiled for me. So like, I mean, Gone Girl, my wife showed me when we first started dating, and I knew nothing about it. So I don't know. I was just gonna let it ride, see what it was about. But once I learned that, I was like, I should probably start this over because this will probably be something I should pay attention to a little more. And the first time I ever watched it, I literally just clicked it because I saw Jake Gyllenhaal was in it.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good in this. I think it's one of my favorite. Now I know Connor, you absolutely love Jake.
Yeah,
And I like him a lot. I think this is one of my favorite things he's done. Um, and this movie, like, was really in classic Fincher style, was really meticulous in terms of how accurate it was about what actually happened. And I think for a lot of people, that leads itself to um, frustration and feeling like a lack of satisfaction. And I love that because that is exactly like, imagine being a detective or a reporter or an investigative journalist, whatever, like working on this and not getting answers and pouring a large period of time into this and just feeling like so distraught about like not having an understanding of what really happened. Like that is how they felt, and I think like the audience feeling the exact same way is so brilliant. um I really really enjoy that. And I think like if you're going to make something like this, like you have to be um respectful to everything that happened. You have to be respectful to every aspect of the investigation and the victims and just everything. And I think so many times, like, I have kind of a pet peeve with, for example, that Dahmer series that came out on Netflix. Like, that's a joke to me. Like, that to me felt so like exploitative. Um, like you should. that's a whole other conversation, I guess. But like the way that was done, and like a lot of true crime stuff is done is so distasteful and like kind of embarrassing, frankly. Um, but again, I think the way this was done in terms of just like factual, accurate, frustrating, it just felt very real and respectful.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the better aspects of this movie is RDJ's character kind of like going crazy because he's just been on this case for so long and nothing is kind of piecing itself together. Like,
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that they I think exaggerated a bit for the movie, like his
I
kind
mean,
of
probably.
yeah, but it does make it like not every person, people are going to have different reactions to a situation like this and different ways of handling a period of like frustration, especially when like you're pouring all your time into something. So I think it was good to have, you know, kind of a different um representation of like that struggle and like the effect that can have on someone's psyche. So I do agree with you there, even though that was changed a little bit.
Yeah, this movie gets drugged down a lot for me, though. I mean, I shouldn't say a lot, but I just don't think Mark Ruffalo is a good actor.
Oof.
A lot of
There's
people
that.
feel that way.
Yeah, I was saying. I remember you talking about that on a live. You're like, why do people not like Mark Ruffalo? I would say though, I think he fits. Seeing trailers and everything for Poor Things, I think he fits Yorgos Lanthimos' style perfectly. He seems perfect for that film.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely pretty niche. Uh, but I agree. I think he'll fit well. But we were talking about it, Connor. With I think we talked about this with Eternal Sunshine, Spotless Mind. How he kind of stands out like a sore thumb in that, as just
Yeah.
like get this guy off the screen. I mean, he was
Yeah.
very young, but yeah, I think he needs the right movie. I really like him in Foxcatcher a lot. That's more serious. I think he's good there, but he's definitely hit or miss for me.
Wait, I don't know if you saw my video or you saw the article about it, but the fact of him getting casted in this movie or cast in this movie, basically they told his manager and said, "Hey, this is the deal for Mark Ruffalo. Like, take it or leave it. We really don't want him in this movie, so this is the best you're gonna get," kind of thing. And from that point, he had only really been in. I mean, he had the little role in Eternal Sunshine, but he only been in like comedies and stuff like that. Not a really serious actor at all. So that's why it's so messed up to say that because now he's been nominated. I think he's been nominated 3 times, I believe, for Oscars, which is surprising because
Or
I was going to look it up right now. But yeah, they basically said, "Hey, we don't really want Mark in this movie, so better take or leave our deal because this is the best he's going to get." He was nominated for Spotlight, Foxcatcher, and The Kids Are All Right.
okay, I was gonna
So
guess Shutter Island before knowing any of
mm,
that.
yeah, so it's crazy. I mean, and then this touched base in the article as well. That's why he was shocked when they wanted him to be in the MCU because he had been so disrespected in the past, and he didn't really think anything special about himself. So he was shocked that someone would go out of their way to try to get him in a project like that. But I think he's fine. I mean, like, there's nothing that stands out about Ruffalo, but I think he's a solid actor. And if he's putting the right things, he excels. But he doesn't excel if he's not putting the right things.
I don't think he has like massive like
Range.
yeah, and like versatility. I think he's like more of a like niche like tool to use for a specific role. And like I mean like that's coming from I couldn't act if my life depended on it. Like that's having that talent is amazing. Like and I think it's more on the like it's more the responsibility of the studios or director or casting director to understand like the needs for a particular role and like cast the right person. It's like if he's cast in a role that he's not meant for and like he's gonna do his best, but like it's not his fault. Like if he was casted poorly. I don't think he's ever like really phoning it in. I think many times he might just be, or sometimes he might just be in the wrong role.
See, I think a lot of times he overacts. Like he's trying too hard to
like
convince the
something
audience.
about you in your mind.
Like Eternal Sunshine. I think there's times he's trying too hard to convince us, like on screen. I mean, whether or not he's like trying to play the role of like sounding smart for the science, like when they start having some trouble when Jim Carrey's fighting it from his sleep, or like other scenes, like I don't know, or it's not believable when he's drunk in that movie either.
People
Yeah.
forget that this is, I mean, it's the actor, but it's also the director. Like, that's the job of a director, to get the performance that you want out of your actor. So that's the same thing with Leonardo DiCaprio. When Dan made the video about that, it's like, oh, he's just playing Leonardo DiCaprio. But there's a reason why people are casting him. That's what they want out of him. If they want something differently, it's their job to say, hey, we want something differently out of you, kind of thing. So I feel like people forget that. And, you know, this is exactly, it's Fincher. So this is exactly the performance that David Fincher wanted out of this character. No matter if he didn't, sounds like he didn't want Ruffalo. He didn't care about Ruffalo, but no matter what, he was going to get this performance out of whoever was going to play this character. So I think that a lot of people forget that when it comes to acting, how it's like, how does a movie with incredible cast, why is it not nominated for Best Picture? Well, it's because probably they don't have great chemistry together. You know, people forget that.
Yeah, it's like, well, why were the Brooklyn Nets trash with Harden and KD and Ben Simmons and Kyrie? It's like, you can put, you know, the equivalent of those actors in a movie, doesn't mean it's going to be good. Like, if they don't gel, if there's no chemistry, if they don't understand what each other needs to succeed,
The director's the coach.
yeah,
You know,
and a lot of times you're better off with a more, it might not be the most talented cast, but if they have more balance and like they're all kind of helping each other and understand what each other needs to succeed, and there's a good coach, director, like, you're going to get a better movie, and you're going to beat that team of just like slapped together stars.
Yeah,
I think
you need the Kyle Shanahan of play calling, basically.
yeah, you got to choke that 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. But yeah, and I think you see that, so like, especially now, you see that with like casts that get put together that like look good on paper, and then the movie's just dog shit. And it's like, it's just very AI casting feel. Like, there's no humanity.
I mean, yeah, it could be the source material as well and the story and everything like that. But a lot of times these movies that have brilliant casts have a shitty director or not a good director. The director is very important. And it made me think about the fact that I mentioned the Leo thing, how one thing it adds to Leo, I know we're getting off track again, but the fact that even in Killers of the Flower Moon or Django Unchained, Leo is a star. He's one of like three people. It's like him, Denzel, and Tom Cruise. Those are the stars left, basically, I would say. The big movie stars that people go out and they watch a movie because this person's in it. I think it's really astonishing for an actor of that caliber to be so comfortable with being a supporting actor. And he is not I think in Killers of the Flower Moon, it's a little bit different because I think they're like three main leads rather than him being the forefront, which he is on the poster, but I really don't see it that way. But especially in like Django, like he was at the height of his career and he still is, but he was so comfortable with being a side character in a picture like that.
Well, actually, he wasn't comfortable with that role.
Yeah.
Wait, how so, Connor?
Oh, he did an interview where he like apparently like filming was like stopped for like a day and a half because he like didn't feel right about saying the N-word, which, you know, makes sense, until Samuel L. Jackson pulled him aside and was like, just say it. He was like, we're acting here.
Yeah, and I mean, Samuel L. goes way back with Quentin, and like, clearly
he knows how Quentin is. Yeah,
like they've been on the same page for 25 years about that. So like, but I understand that with Leo. I think he's a pretty, you know, clean cut guy, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, in that's understandable. But yeah, I mean, Leo is very good. I think, like you said, Stone, he just gets called on to like for a specific role because he's established that he can nail it over and over again. But that doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't have the range. Like, he was fucking disgusting in Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, he was a pig.
He's great.
He literally was like an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so
yeah. I have him as my number 2 right now for best male actor
of all time.
No, like for this upcoming Oscar for Killers of the Flower Moon.
I'm assuming you have Killian at number 1, but I'll tell you what, the Holdovers, Paul Giamatti does I love the Holdovers. Great film.
I just feel like there's
big competition this year. It's been a great year for movies. There's so much competition out there.
Yeah, and there's a lot coming at the end of the year too.
Mhm.
Like this was a good year, and like it's nice to see. I feel like there's been improvement. Like if you look back, like 2020. I was looking back. Some dumbass commented that Tenet was the best movie of 2020 on my video, which is like one of the most preposterously just absurd things I've ever seen in my life. But it was also a very poor year for movies. Um,
No wonder they all got pushed back. Probably.
Well, I was just about to say, I mean, like Tenet's probably up there for like
Besides
me.
Tenet. Besides Tenet.
I like Tenet. I mean, maybe not even like top 10 or top 15, but again, there's no competition. So
There was 2020 was a lot of stuff that like snuck out. Like there was a lot of like smaller, more indie stuff. So I think if you're like if you're looking at like blockbusters, yeah, but and I just main point was I think it was such a tough year for the industry, and I think each year since then it's getting better. And like the industry right now doesn't feel as reliant on like Marvel and DC like to get people in seats. Like people are getting excited to go see other stuff, and like I don't know if that's just we might just feel that way because of like if we have like a jaded viewpoint towards that because stuff is exciting to us that might not be exciting to the average person. But I feel like things are in a pretty good place right now in terms of.
I mean, I was gonna say, you know how much I loved it, but the fact that that Godzilla movie made $12 million its opening weekend. That's the highest ever for a Japanese movie in the U.S. ever. That's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool to see. It depends on how you see cinema. The fact that unfortunately, which because of a lot of reasons, the Marvels was the lowest MCU movie ever. But then you have the highest grossing opening weekend of a Japanese film ever. Very much things are changing in the industry, which is really really interesting and very cool to see. I would say Netflix is stepping up their game a lot when it comes to films. They have a lot of they've acquired a lot of good films that they're putting out, especially for the award seasons as well. But
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of trial and error there, and there's also like so much, and I think their general model has been off quantity. Like if we produce enough stuff, something will stick. But I agree that I think it's getting better, and they're also getting stuff from like better directors and more legitimate feeling stories, and I hope they keep doing that. But yeah, do you want to?
I was gonna say one thing about Zodiac that is kind of cool. I don't think we talked about it. Was one thing is that scene where the two are chilling by the pond, and the killer comes up behind them.
Yeah.
David Fincher actually had the guy who survived that on set and had recreate that scenery. And they flew in trees on helicopters to plant the trees where they are in the shots, which is really kind of I feel like really a Fincher thing to do. But I thought that was very interesting about the film. But
Yeah, and that felt very real, and that makes sense as to why.
because the guy was there, yeah.
Yeah, I can't even imagine having that experience, but
Well,
Yeah, because she died, right? In that, yeah.
Yeah.
or being back in his shoes, like recreating that scene and then having to be back there. Like I'm sure that was a whole other,
You know what? If I remember correctly, I think in the film they're portrayed as a couple. I don't think that they were a couple in real life. Now, why were they by the pond? I don't know. It's just a guy and a girl just chilling by a pond. But I think that is something which makes more sense why he was so willing to come on set and say everything. If that was his girlfriend or romantic partner, I feel like it would affect you. I mean, it'll affect you no matter what, but less of a connection. But I believe that's also something about the film as well that is added.
yeah. And I was saying to Connor, like all in all, I just feel like it does such a good job in like communicating frustration and the audience. I think a lot of people feel the same way. Like, I just watched this for 3 hours. I don't have the spoon-fed answer. But like, yes, that's how everyone felt about the real thing that happened. And like communicating that is just brilliant.
I don't think anybody can communicate the Zodiac story better than Fincher. I think this is really good for him. I don't think it's his best film, but I think this is perfect for him.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd agree with that. I think one of my favorite lines in this movie that like is kind of swept under the rug because it is a throwaway line, but where he's in the person's house and he goes, "Not a lot of people in California have basements."
Yeah.
So many things like that in this. Yeah.
Yeah, all the subtle, like for a movie to be this long and to maintain tension is impressive.
Doesn't let up.
Yeah, and it's through a lot of like subtlety, and it kind of gives you a little piece at a time, and just keeps you like kind of going down that breadcrumb trail, like trying to find out what's happening, just like them. I think it's excellent. Should we get the next one,
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah. The next one is Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Kev just texted me. I just called you Kevin, so I do know your name's
Yeah.
Connor.
I was just gonna like skip over that.
I did not have a stroke there. I'm sorry.
I mean, that sucks if you do. It's not like we can help you right now, you know.
This would be a
most I
memorable
can do for you is
podcast.
call-
I'll tell you that.
Most I can do for you is like call 911 and say, "Yeah, I got a friend in Philly. He might be having a stroke right now.
Somewhere. Go find him.
He's around." And then I'll like hop on Facebook, try and find you, find like your girlfriend or mom or something. Be like, you might want to get to him.
That would be could make a good Fincher movie. But yeah, Benjamin Button. Do you guys want to start?
Is it a war
I'll
movie?
start. Have you watched Benjamin Button?
No, I know. Yeah, I watched it this morning. Actually,
Oh, okay.
I'm just
I kind of like
the
it.
category.
Oh,
What do you like about it?
I just think it's very. I think it's a very good. I guess it's like a coming of age, not coming of age, but a very good love story that's very uniquely told, and it has a lot of the same themes of life. I mean, it's basically someone's life, right? And it's not unique in the way that that's a lot of the same things that people would think about any movie that's about, you know, the progression of life. But the fact that it's told in this unique way, just it's fascinating to watch. It's a really fascinating movie. I really liked it, and it's funny because I watched it, and my wife is like, "Well, you know, did they ever answer the fact of why he's aging backwards?" So I was like, "No, but that's not important."
Again, like this is one I feel like everyone kind of knows the origin or like the basis of the storyline, so I knew that going in. But Frank, like I kind of felt like the beginning of it where the guy made a clock that goes backwards and like Teddy Roosevelt showed up for the unveiling of it. Like I kind of felt like that was a little pointless. Like cuz it didn't really tell you anything about how Benjamin Button came to be.
Yeah. This doesn't do very much for me. I feel like this also just seems like like it stands out from a lot of his other work, I think in a very interesting way. And just doesn't kind of feel like it was necessarily in his wheelhouse, which I get, like, I appreciate him trying. But I don't know. This just doesn't do very much for me, especially like watching a lot of his other stuff.
But yeah, I mean like I'm also like a fairly big Brad Pitt fan and like I don't know, something about his role here just didn't really feel all that special to me.
Yeah. Just like in terms of feeling a little bit generic for like what he can do, or like
Yeah, like I mean, obviously, I feel like in his other two Fincher movies that he's done, Seven and Fight Club, like we see a lot more out of Brad Pitt than we do in this one. Like it kind of felt like this one was he was just doing it to be with Fincher again, almost.
Yeah, I think for a lot of it, it's like you don't even obviously feel like you're watching Brad Pitt. I also think like I feel like a lot of how he looks just looks so strange and bad, almost like bad CGI or like bad make. Like I think it got a lot of praise for that aspect of it, but I think a lot of it looks so weird that it's almost like jarring and pulls you out of the movie. And I also just a lot of it just kind of creeps me out a little bit. Like I think it just makes me feel like a little weird and uncomfortable. I don't know. Do you feel that way at all, or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like especially like you know he's a kid, but that part in the beginning where him and Daisy are like under the cover together, or like under a fort together that they built in the living room.
Yeah, I think
Like,
it's just like it's kind of a strange look. Like it's regardless of like the context of the story, like there's obviously an uncomfortability there. And I don't know. I think it just feels strange to me. And I'm not it kind of takes me out of it again. I'm just kind of like off put, and I feel like it pulls me out of the story.
You could argue that like them together under that like Ford or like the covers, whichever one it really is, like isn't necessary, but like it kind of shows like the struggle of him as a kid. But I feel like there's a lot better ways you could have shown it.
Something I was reading a little bit about is a lot of people have compared this to Forrest Gump a bit, and just in terms of like uh, a full life, kind of like being examined and going through like different periods of history. And I think I'm not a big. I mean, we've talked about that. I'm not a big Forrest Gump guy. So like something about
Yeah,
this.
neither of us are.
Yeah. So I think like something about this kind of like long lifetime story just doesn't do that much for me. And then I also think like Pitt and Kate Blanchett. I don't think the chemistry is that great. And just I don't know. I feel like that needs to like really hit to kind of carry the movie, and I don't feel like it does. So yeah, all in all, this is just like I'm not trying to trash it. I wouldn't fault someone for liking it, but for me, it just doesn't really do too much.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think like the one standout role in this movie is Queenie, played by Taraji P. Henson. I think she
Yeah.
was fantastic in this. Which
Yeah.
she's good in almost everything that I've seen her in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is one that just you probably could have cut maybe like a half hour out of this, and it would be a lot more engaging.
Yeah.
But as it stands, just I feel like it's kind of a slog because I don't have that investment that I need to normally get through a movie that's that long. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
One thing I would like to see too, but like it would completely change how the story is written. But like maybe see him try and be a parent, like as he's getting younger at the end. But I mean that would completely change. Like he would, or his daughter wouldn't be reading this story about him instead. Like it would just have to be following him from start to finish of life.
yeah. I think there are maybe some other moments in life or directions they could have gone that would have been a little more compelling, and made for a more interesting narrative. But yeah, as it stands, this is something I don't really think I go back too much. I also think, I mean, it's interesting that it was an adaptation of a F. Scott Fitzgerald like short story. So I think that's cool. Finding like interesting source material like that, but it just doesn't do too much for me.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time I hear F. Scott Fitzgerald, I just think of the scene from Ted 2.
You see, they're making that Ted series.
Are they really?
Making a Ted prequel series, I believe, on I want to say Amazon.
I don't know how necessary that is.
I mean, dude, most of what gets made now is not necessary, but they're just trying to find something to make money. But yeah,
Like, I've seen what I want out of Ted.
Yeah, there's a trailer out, and some people think it's funny, but I don't really feel a need to watch that. I don't know.
I mean, if Seth MacFarlane is like directing it and stuff, I might check it out because he is a very good comedic writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we jump into the next one?
Yeah. Actually, getting off topic on Seth MacFarlane real quick. Have you seen A Million Ways to Die in the West?
Yes.
That's
Yes,
one of
a
my
very long
favorite
time ago.
cameos it's one of my favorite cameos in cinema history was Django at the end credits scene.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic.
I kind of forgot about that movie. It's like some moments are kind of funny, but
See, I watched that for the first time ever this year, so that's probably why I remember it so well. But
okay.
And the whole backstory of Liam Neeson on that movie. But anyway, next movie we're hopping into is The Social Network, a movie I was harsh on for years. I watched it years ago, and I thought it was like aggressively mediocre. Like I just didn't enjoy it at all. And then it was funny because I talk to the guys from Raiders of the Lost podcast every now and then, and I told them that, and they're like, "No, you need to go rewatch it." They're like, "We thought the same thing," and so I rewatched it last week in preparation for this, and so I treated this movie too harshly.
What did you not like about it originally, or what about it like failed to connect with you?
To be honest, I probably didn't pay attention enough as much as I should have. So I remember just thinking that the movie was kind of boring. I didn't like. I mean, not that you're really supposed to like them, but I thought the Winklevosses were like just super annoying, and there was nothing like I enjoyed about that. Um, so over and also just kind of Jesse Eisenberg is a weird dude, but also now that I've rewatched it, now that I have a better movie knowledge and like pay attention more in movies than I did back then, like Jesse Eisenberg played this aggressively well.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. Stone, what are kind of your general thoughts?
You guys can still hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. My general thoughts. Favorite Fincher movie. That's a real general thought. Love it to death. Great movie. Like I said, similar to the Fight Club. I think everything is working here brilliantly together. Jesse Eisenberg for me is the second best casted person in a Fincher film. I think the next movie that we'll talk about, no. In a couple movies, we'll talk about who I think is the best cast person. Jesse's great. This movie came out in 2009, I believe, because it was nominated for the 2010 Oscars. I talked to Dan about
Now
it
it's
today, and
2010.
it came out in 2010.
That's what
I
Letterboxd
guess
is
it must
telling
be.
me.
Yeah. Basically, it's
Yeah.
wild to think about the fact that both like just with the movie coming out, the severity of how much it affected society, but how much Oppenheimer affected the world just as much as Mark Zuckerberg has, which is insane to think about because they've done two completely different things, but they will go down in history. Basically, they've changed everything about the society. I think it's a very important film, and there hasn't been a more important film in Fincher's work than this one, in my opinion. But
Yeah, I think since you guys both spoke a little bit, I this doesn't do as much for me as I think it does a lot of other people, and I think a lot of it goes into the likability of the characters, which is obviously not supposed to be high. Um, I think a lot of what I look for is connection with characters in a lot in movies in general. Um, I think that kind of lacks here, and that lacks, I think, in a lot of Fincher's work, just because of how um, I see a lot of it can be. But at the same time, like I have massive respect for it. I think the performances are great. The screenplay itself is obviously wonderful. Like you mentioned earlier, Stone, like the music, the score fits the tone perfectly. Um, I think there's some, you know, liberties taken in terms of the actual storytelling, but again, that's frequently necessary to make like an engaging story. Um, and yeah, like it's given people a lot of memorable moments. I think for a lot of people, this is their favorite. Um, it's in my upper echelon, but definitely not uh, close to one for me. But I do have a lot of respect for it. Um, and Jesse Eisenberg was perfectly cast. It couldn't have really been any better. So uh, yeah, I think they definitely nailed the casting here.
You know what I'm just now realizing that I'm looking at the cast of this movie while you guys talk is Erica Albright, his girlfriend in the beginning, is the girl in the dragon tattoo.
yep.
Wait, is who Connor?
So his
Rooney
girlfriend
Mara.
in the very
Rooney Mara.
beginning, Erica Albright, that he like blogs about, that's the girl with the dragon tattoo.
In which version?
Rooney Mara. She plays
Oh
his
wait, that's
girlfriend. You see,
you're saying that's Rooney Mara.
yeah, I didn't realize she was the same person
Yeah, no, I
in both
honestly I
films.
honestly completely forgot that she played Erica. Um, but yeah, no, I was again having a bit of a stroke there. But yeah, that's funny. It's cool. It's always cool to see like And I think, Stone, we were talking about this one time, like, there isn't always the most carryover from actors throughout working with Fincher. And I think potentially because it's like a really difficult process, apparently. So it is cool to see like when someone makes a jump with him. I love Rooney Mara. I think she's ridiculously good in general. So yeah, I mean that's also just like it's such a small role. I feel like I almost forget about it, but I forgot she was in this.
She was also the executive producer for Studs.
Did not
Did
know
you
that.
watch that?
No.
That was a documentary came out on Netflix, it's still there, about Jonah Hill and his psychiatrist or therapist. One of the, I think it's psychiatrist.
I remember seeing bits and pieces of that when that came out, like on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, it's well worth the watch, and it's only like an hour and a half, I think.
Okay. Out of curiosity, Connor, where do you have this in your ranking?
Let me verify. Because I just made my list right before we hopped on. This currently sits in my 3, but I've bounced it around from 3 and 4.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think it's at this is at three as well. It's very nearly 4. It's such a coin flip there for me. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've always wanted to like this more than other people, but it's not one I find myself going back to that much. Even though I feel like technically one of his more rewatchable movies.
Probably. But I feel like this and Fight Club are both like very film bro-y movies. Like they're so talked about on like everything, like Film Talk, YouTube, everything. And
it
for
makes it
some
kind of
reason, I just feel like
exhausting.
I've never connected to this movie as much as everyone else does.
Well, I think you and me both kind of look for like some type of emotional connection with characters. I mean,
Yeah.
and like it's a very cold movie. But again, that's consistent for him. So yeah, I wish I liked it more. They've talked about making a sequel here, which would be interesting. That's
About what?
something about basically everything that's happened with Facebook since. Like, there's been so much in terms of like privacy. It was heavily involved with the last few elections. Like, there's been a lot of questions about like fact checking and like validity of content and how that impacts like people's opinions. Like, there's a lot to get into and a lot that's happened, and they've talked about and also just Zuckerberg himself. I think I was just kind of talking about, I don't remember exactly, but just like we were just kind of briefly going over oh wait, you mean like just now?
Yeah, were you talking about like real life Zuckerberg?
Yeah, so we were talking about the potential of a social network sequel. And basically kind of what that would look like and the things that would go into. So I was talking to Connor kind of about like everything Facebook's gone through in terms of like privacy issues, in terms of like misinformation, the involvement with like the elections. Like it's been through a lot, and it's been through a lot of change. Like even going into Meta and all, and then Zuckerberg himself has been kind of a controversial figure. And there's almost 15 years of history since then, so I think there's definitely material there to make, but it would be very difficult, most likely, and probably pretty divisive. So they'd probably have to take some stands here and there on different things, but it would definitely be interesting.
I feel like it wouldn't feel like a true sequel because you would have to completely change it.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be a completely different movie in terms of most things. But I mean, I wouldn't be breaking down the door to see it, but I would watch it. But yeah, any other closing thoughts on Social Network?
Yeah, Connor, you had asked me what makes this movie so good for me, and something that my favorite part about film is scripts. I love screenplays. That's why I love Tarantino so much. I really like it. And I mean, this won for best adapted screenplay. I think the script is brilliant. My favorite scene, surprisingly, where I think the script is so good, is the scene of what's his name, Justin Timberlake and Dakota Johnson. I think how Justin is speaking there is incredible. How he says, "Oh, the shoe's on the other," and she goes foot, and he goes table, which is now turn. Very quick. He says, "There's a snake in here." Great stuff. I think Justin Timberlake does a really good job, and it's very smart by Fincher to cast Justin Timberlake, because in real life, um, like the guy, oh, what's his name? Do you remember his name? The actual man himself.
Sean Parker.
Yeah, Sean Parker does not look like that in real life. He does not look. He's not that good looking. So I think it was very smart for them to cast Justin Timberlake, because he just who he is in general. And I think this was really before his career kind of took off, because I think he did Friends with Benefits after this, and then also In Time. So this is like his first maybe big role. But it was very important to cast somebody like that, because he's supposed to be looked at as like an idol. That's how Mark Zuckerberg looks at him. Like he's the coolest guy in the entire room always. So I think it's very smart that the audience also feels that way as well, because you're looking at Justin Timberlake, right? And I think something that's really cool is that Jonathan Groff actually almost got this part. And I think it's really interesting because he was later casted as the lead for David Fincher's show Mindhunter. But yeah, that's where it's very funny as well. There's very unnecessary things that still work, like the fact they didn't have to do the Army Hammer double. They didn't have to do that. They could have gotten actor twins. I guess it is a huge role, so you want to make sure you have a good actor. But I think it's so incredible how seamlessly that looks still to this day. I think it looks phenomenal, and it's very interesting because the guy who played his body double, I don't remember the actor's name, or because they just copied and pasted Army Hammer's face on there. You got it.
It's Josh Pence.
Josh Pence. He's actually an Olympic swimmer or rower. Like he was actually
really?
part of it. Yes. And it's very interesting because Army Hammer is such a jacked guy, and you would think that he wouldn't have difficulty with that. He was really struggling to row. And rowing is a very difficult sport. And Army Hammer was struggling and needed to, I believe, tape up his hands and stuff like that because they were getting so abused by doing all that stuff. But yeah, Social Network, I think, is fantastic. The script is incredible, and it's very interesting too because the screenplay, I think it's the book is called The Accidental Billionaires. It wasn't finished yet. The book was not finished yet. They knew that this story was going to be so good that they got the rights to make it before the book had even finished. So it's very funny because it's like, oh, it's off of an adapted screenplay. Yes and no, because Craig Sorkin basically took inspiration, but not necessarily copied an actual book. And I didn't know this for the longest time, but Sorkin's actually in the film. The writer, he is in the scene where Mark is supposed to act cool, and Sean Parker tells him to act like he doesn't care, and he shows up. I don't think this is when he shows up in his pajamas, but he's doing that sound kind of thing. The guy that he's talking to is the writer of the movie, and I think that was cool. That's something I learned on a recent rewatch. But yeah, for me, it's really just the scripts, and that's the only thing it won an Oscar for, I believe. Maybe the music as well, but very deserving. So I'm upset that it didn't win Best Picture, and I told Dan that today. But if anything, it would have been a crime if it didn't win for Best Script. And I think this is the best script out of any of Fincher's films. But yeah, for me, that's why it stands apart from anything, because I'm a big man of dialogue. So
You guys know how Army Hammer beefed up for this role?
How's that?
He went on his cannibal diet, strict meat,
I thought that's where you were headed with this.
a lot of protein.
yeah. I think there's a scene where they're just eating randomly, and it's like 3 patties. Like the burger is huge because these Olympic rowers have to eat so much food.
Dude, I had no idea about the whole Army Hammer cannibal thing till the other night. I was laying in bed. My wife was you're just sitting there playing on our phone, and I turned on Call Me By Your Name. And she goes, "Why are you watching a movie with a cannibal in it?" And I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah, it was a very, very bizarre turn for him.
An interesting casting, what if, was the fact that I believe Shia LaBeouf was considered to play Mark Zuckerberg.
That wouldn't have been nearly as good.
No, and it's incredible, and I would love to see Eisenberg because I think he's a really good actor, and he doesn't really get a lot of roles. I feel like not in like big name Hollywood movies anymore. Is that he really loved working with Fincher, and that's something that I really didn't get to touch on. I don't know the details of it, but I know that Jake Gyllenhaal had a really tough time on the Zodiac set with how much like takes Fincher was doing, and Jesse Eisenberg loved it, absolutely loved it.
Doesn't
And
surprise me. I feel like he's kind of an alien.
Yeah.
yeah,
Which is why he's the perfect man to play Zuckerberg.
and
Yeah.
I'll touch on it briefly, but the fact of how quick the dialogue is. I don't know if you saw my video, but the fact that Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher sat down and they timed the dialogue and they read it together and they timed how quick it should be in the film, and then they clicked it and they knew how quick it had to be spoken. That was a lot of the reason for the 99 takes of the first scene, was the fact that Rooney Mara and Jesse Eisenberg were not talking quick enough. Their performances might have been fantastic, but it needs to have that quick pace, which I feel like really works with the characters. You say like you can't connect, a reason for you can't connect with them, and it makes sense. These are guys that we're not familiar with. They're I mean, you guys are geniuses, but they're very smart, very tech guys, Harvard, everything like that. The quickness of the dialogue makes sense with every single person that is in this film, every single character, and I think it works. It's incredible. I really do like it. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I've never made like a list ever, but it's up there for sure.
Sweet. Anything else for you on this, Connor?
I don't think I have much else on it. Like I said, my piece mainly. I actually was very impressed by Justin Timberlake in this role. Other than that, though, in his career, I don't know how much he's really impressed me with acting wise.
Yeah. Fair enough. Do you want to roll into Gone Girl?
That's not next.
Girl with the dragon tattoo, my guy.
Oh my god. I'm a dumbass. What year was Dragon Tattoo?
2011.
That's honestly
Which is
crazy that he came right back.
That is insane when you think of the gap between Gone Girl and Mank.
Yeah.
Which I guess he did do Mindhunter, but yeah, it's insane that that he did back to back.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially with like the detail that Fincher puts in every one of his movies and how long they are.
yeah, and I'll start here. This is my favorite Fincher by a bit. And I actually just changed that. It was 2 for a long time. But on like rewatching, I just think this is different than anything else he's done. Like I said, I love Rooney Mara. I think she's excellent. I think that is probably my favorite character he's ever written. She's one of my favorite characters I've ever seen in anything, frankly. I think she has kind of that, it's a strange comparison, but almost in a similar way to talking about the writing for like Zuckerberg. Like it's the same kind of like sharp, quick, like no bullshit like type of communication that I really like, and she just feels kind of one step ahead. She's very like capable. She's just such a strong character, and I think again, like we've kind of talked about, I think Fincher's struggling to write women, and she's obviously not a perfect character, but I think she's one of the most interesting female character he's written, even more so than Gone Girl. So, and I'm also a massive fan of Daniel Craig. And this is, again, I think we're very much right in his kind of comfortable zone. It's kind of I think he's in a role that fits him very well. But I love kind of like the mystery. I like the way it kind of spirals and the story unfolds, and the supporting cast. I mean, Christopher Plummer, Stellan Skarsgård, like they piled a bunch of really good actors in this movie, and just let them do their thing with a great script and like a classic kind of Fincher environment. Like it's freezing cold, it's dark, it's just you feel like you're there and it fits the story perfectly. Um, I think this is excellent. I wouldn't change anything about it. So yeah, this is my favorite thing he's ever made. And I'm also, I would say, I feel like I'm a sucker for like a revenge story in general, and this is kind of like the ultimate like slow burn revenge, and like Rooney Mara being like a victim of like abuse and whatnot, and getting a chance to get involved in something on like this scale, even larger than herself. And I love her relation. Like they didn't have to make her romantically involved with Daniel Craig, but I like really love it. I think they're like one of my favorite uh like couples on screen. I think they have good chemistry. Uh, I just really like the way they interact. So yeah, that's kind of summary of my thoughts.
That kind of took me off guard when, like, all of a sudden, like, right away, she started, like, getting with him, like, romantically. And a lot of times that happens in movies, and you're like, why is this happening right now? But it very much makes sense of her character. And to feel like she hasn't had someone be nice to her like that or be an actual normal human being, you know? And it's no surprise that with what she's faced in her life, that she's so quick to, like, jump to that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think she's very like she's so like I feel like it could have been strange if it didn't fit her character, but I feel like she's so direct and just like no bullshit. Um, and I feel like it's interesting even from the first scene when he walks into her apartment and she's so on edge, like she has her taser, like she's just kind of watching him like a cat almost, like she's just like waiting for him to like you know make a mistake or like be weird towards her or whatever, and he's just so matter of fact and just like normal, but she still kind of has like those defenses up for a while, kind of like feeling him out. um but he just kind of like treats her like a normal person, so I like their dynamic a lot.
One of the things I love most too about like her character, or like the way Fincher did this, was all of the like stuff he showed that you don't really have to show. Like I don't even think there's dialogue in it, but the scene where the guy steals her bag at the train station, and she like goes up, fights him, and gets it back, and then just walks onto the train like it was nothing. Like I think that makes you connect to the character so much more, or just like care about her more.
Yeah, yeah, and I think she just feels like a very real person, and I feel like I also like that they're both so proficient at what they do and so like technically sound in their professions, and I feel like it puts enough time into like showing you like how smart and sharp they both are, um so that it feels like believable with everything that like all the investigation and like how they just hunt him down and like break through everything that's happening. I love the mystery of it. I think it's exposed in a very like cohesive and timely way.
I will say this is a film that'll get a lot better for me on rewatch. Because to be honest, this is the first time I watched it. It was this past month, and I got really confused with the family members. I had no idea what this movie was about, so I got really confused. I mean, were they in what, Norway or Sweden?
Sweden, I believe.
Yeah, so I got really confused with a lot of family members and a lot of family dynamics. And then one thing that also I didn't like, but I liked at the same time, was the fact that they cast Stellan Skarsgård, because he's one of my favorite actors, and kind of because of his casting, I knew that he was going to be the culprit, because I feel like there's no reason why you don't cast Stellan Skarsgård unless it is for something as important as that, if that makes sense. I was saying, I bet it's him, because if I had Stellan Skarsgård in my movie, I would make him the guy, because he's a phenomenal.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. Um, What do you think, Connor?
I kind of going off of him. I mean, there's a few movies that he's like not like that, and I don't think my Skarsgård knowledge is as great as it should be, because it's funny. Like the first thing people think of when they hear like Stellan Skarsgård, I don't know. What would you guys say? Because for me, it's Deep Blue Sea.
I honestly kind of forgot about that movie. It's
I
also
th-
it's also funny. It's funny that they cast like one of the most famous like Swede actors of all time in this like big Swedish movie. I think that was a cool nod. And I think was this. I'm assuming this was shot on site. Do you guys know off the top of your head?
I'll Google it real quick.
It's funny. They could have just had the whole family be all the Skarsgårds.
Yeah, it says the primary filming location was in Sweden.
Yeah.
Also in LA, a little bit in London too. But and it feel like it. I think the feel of this is very a little bit of Bond-ish, but almost with Rooney Mara as the Bond-like character, which is interesting. But I think the tone of it is very much, and I would love to see Fincher make a Bond movie, honestly.
Yeah,
I was
something
going to
that I
ask you
couldn't.
guys how this compares because I've never seen a Bond movie.
That's wild. I think it also like it's so tough to say because like there's been so many iterations of him and they've changed in tone so much over the course of 60 years.
But yeah. I'm more talking Daniel Craig's Bond. Was this before or after he was cast as that?
This
After.
was after, yeah, but like in
Okay.
the course of um
I
I
thought
want to say
so.
Skyfall. This was 2011.
I think Casino Royale was his first one, I believe. I think it came out in 2007.
Yeah, so this has a little bit of a similar feel to me to Skyfall, um, which is the one with Javier Bardem as the villain, which came out the next year. Um, just in terms of like the darkness, moodiness. Um, I also think there's some like very dark, tongue-in-cheek, like funny stuff in this movie that I enjoy. Uh, but I also could see a lot of people not liking it. If you told me you weren't into it, I would not fault you. It's really dark and hard to watch sometimes, but
I
I
was going to
love a
say,
good
especially the
revenge.
scene with the social worker.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I didn't know that going in. I was watching with my wife, and I was like, "Wow, this is way more intense than any other Fincher film."
Yeah, yeah. That's like kind of at the heart of the story itself. Um, but I mean, to me, it feels real, and like there's people like people get taken advantage of in the world all the time. And again, like that's Fincher going into like people and what people are like, and how when people are vulnerable and like don't have other like means to get what they need, like they just get taken advantage of in every way imaginable. So it's awful, but feels real to me. But I also love like when she goes back and like he gets his comeuppance, like that's great to me. And I love like her matter of fact nature. Like the violence feels very real. Um, I think that's I think it's a strong scene.
Oh, yeah.
One,
It's right there in comparison with Kill Bill with Buck.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. But again, like I said, I could see people not liking this. I get it, but um, to me, I wouldn't change a single thing about this movie.
I'd say a couple things that one thing I like and one thing I don't like. I liked, and it was very interesting because I was sitting there waiting, is the fact that they don't really connect for a long time.
Yeah.
Like it's setting up everything about the mystery, and then setting up everything about her character. And usually that wouldn't be good in the film, but both of them are so interesting. She's so interesting to care and she's really the main character. It's called The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yes.
You get some fleshing out of Daniel Craig, but not as much. But then it's cool because she's way smarter than him, and that's plain. She's able to catch on to things really quickly. So you don't need to see her get explained the mystery as much as Daniel Craig is getting explained everything that's happened because she can catch on to it very quickly, which is how she discovers that like people are connected in like I don't know a couple days or whatever she does. She's like, oh yeah, there's way more women than you thought there was. But one thing that was in the back of my mind that I can't help thinking about was the fact that this is part of a book series, and everyone's like, oh, is Fincher going to do the whole series? No, I don't think that'd be really a Fincher thing to do. But the whole thing where she goes undercover at the very end and she's doing all this stuff and she kind of screws over that big guy, takes all of his money out, all of that, that felt like to me the possibility of a sequel and say, hey, this is what more we can do with this character kind of thing. Like, this is what she can do if she has the opportunity. So that was something that kind of took me out of it. I don't necessarily know if that was necessary, but I get why they did it. And the only thing I could think about is like that, all that stuff is very vital for a sequel, is what I thought. So that was something in the back of my mind.
I also feel like that's a shame. It's a shame. I guess we're not gonna get that most likely, because I think that's a character that would do really well now. Like there's like, I mean, this is a much bigger conversation, but I feel like there's a lot of poorly written characters in general, but there's a lot of, I think, female characters that, like, for example, like the Marvels, the writing in that is bad, and like that's not anyone's fault. It's not the character's fault, but like those characters have to be written like hokey, and the movie has to be fun. And but like, why can't it be like a serious, good movie? Like, and she's like feels like a real person. She's not sitting there joking or quipping or trying to be cute or fun. Like she's just living life and like dealing with like difficulties, and then also like super intelligent and like super capable, and also like capable of protecting herself. Like she's like a real person. Like, and I think she's a great character. And I think I would love to see a sequel now. I think it would do really well, but it's also really, really dark, and it's not, you're going to probably make it rated R, so it's not like you're going to be, getting kids to go see it, but she's a great character, and I wish she had more movies, like a whole series. I would love it. So.
Yeah, you could literally have like a female Bond. That's basically, that's what it feels like. And it's a missed opportunity because I feel like there should be something like that with a female lead in Hollywood, and there's really not. And
well,
like
we're
you said,
actually
there's a lot.
getting that. They're doing the
What?
spinoff of John Wick with Ana de Armas, the ballerina.
Yeah, but that's a spinoff. I guess I don't want to hamper. I haven't watched it, but I'm glad that we're getting it now. But it would have been cool to get this back in 2011. Imagine if we had 3 or 4 Girl with a Dragon Tattoo movies by now.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I would prefer, like, the next Bond could be a woman. I wouldn't give a flying fuck, but I would prefer to have seen 5 of these movies, because this is a female character that exists. That's awesome. And like, why not let her have a series that feels like that's based off this real character, like rather than just trying to co-opt something and like, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like, I would love to see just like, characters get a chance in stories that already exist, because there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of incredible female characters in literature, book series. Like, take those and adapt them and make them good. Like, you don't have to just say, oh, James Bond is a woman now because we want to like get a different perspective or a different target audience. Like, why not continue with that, but also write like great female stories as well and like adapt them?
Back to our conversation from earlier, that's why I think I would like to see a Kill Bill 3 so much.
Yeah, and it's another really, like, I think she might be. I was literally just thinking, I'm working on a video of like my top Tarantino characters of all time, like top 10, and like I'm just thinking about where she belongs, and it's very fucking high. Like,
She might be my number 2.
With number 1 being,
honestly, Hans Landa, probably.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. So yeah, huge fan of this. Wish there was more, and big Rooney Mara fan.
You might have just changed my ranking a little bit.
Dude, I hate doing podcasts because literally I'll have my list up, and this entire episode, when we talk about movies, I've been like shifting them around because it's making me think about it more, or like hearing your perspective makes me change my like thought, because I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, and then I shift it.
It's a tough filmography to rank.
Well, yeah, which is also why it's good we do our ranking at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you guys want to get into Gone Girl?
I was gonna say you were so excited about it before.
Yeah. You want to start, Connor?
Yeah, I will start because this is my number one.
Okay.
When my wife showed
I
me
like that we
this,
all have a different
like,
number one. That's good, I think.
yeah, I don't know. When I first watched this, like, I remember, like, it was one of the few movies that has really had me on, like, the edge of my seat for that first, like, what, 45 minutes, give or take, where, like, you don't know where his wife went. And then, like, there's all these pieces, like, leading to something else. And, like, you're trying to guess who did it or if he did it. Keeps you guessing. I think the second act does slow down a bit. Like, when she's, like, in the trailer park and all that. But I think the whole scene with or a whole storyline of like her with Neil Patrick Harris's character, like really intensifies the movie. Him trying to go on the news network and like all the subtle details of him doing this over his lips to get her attention and try and make her come back.
Yeah, I think this is very, very, very good. And again, it's like you hate these fucking characters. Like they're awful.
Yeah.
And I like that it's not. I think watching this and rewatching, I try to figure out like what exactly is the message. Like, is there what is being said? And it's really just. I don't know if this is just like a commentary on marriage in general, and it seems like a very negative one at that, or just a commentary on relationships in terms of like how people just bend themselves and twist themselves to like be something to appease someone else, and how dangerous that can be, and then the long-term effects of that. And obviously this is like that at its very worst, but I think um, it's just really a movie about the importance of, I guess, knowing yourself and knowing who you are and being able to walk away from people that don't um, appreciate that, but also the dangers of just completely losing yourself in an act, um, which is interesting. But it's like Ben Affleck's character is not likable in any way either. One thing I wanted to ask you guys was when he knocks her down, did that happen or did that not happen?
That didn't happen.
Yeah, I don't think it happened.
Where it's like the staircases right there.
Yeah, I felt like that was I didn't know if that was supposed to be ambiguous because I feel like a lot of what she said in terms of like how he treated her was fabricated, but he also was like wildly flawed. And like he also he puts his hand on her at the end, and like smashes her head into the wall. So like I didn't.
Yeah, but a lot has happened.
Yeah, I
for
think at
sure,
that
but
point
I
it was
think
just driven from pure anger.
yeah, I get that. I think I don't know. I just wasn't sure if that was supposed to be real or not, and I think it also like adds or subtracts something from like everything that happens. I don't know, because like I think the intention, like the point was supposed to be all of her fear was fabricated, which it obviously was. So I just feel like that would have been an odd thing to include and have actually have happened.
Yeah, well, she had to include that to show that in the diary to give him, oh, he did this, like he probably killed her, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think this is the best casting of anybody in a Fincher film for Affleck, because Affleck is so terrible when it comes to the media. He does this shit. He literally does not do the right thing in front of the media. Like he always looks depressed. Is he depressed? Who knows? But he like there's this whole thing of him looking annoyed at like an Oscar party or something like that, and Jennifer Lopez is like, "Hey, shape up." Like that didn't really happen, but people interpreted that way because he's terrible on camera. Like he has been ridiculed for years because he's just off on camera and he just doesn't give a shit. I think that's very funny that this character is very similarly like that. And when you were talking about the what's the point of the story, stuff about marriage, something very interesting is the fact I think him and Jennifer Gardner got divorced 1 year after this movie came out.
Yeah, and I think it's the like "Hello Darkness, My Old Friend" meme from the Batman like press tour. Like that's exactly what you're talking about. And I think this movie is very Fincher can get very meta. I think this is a really good example of that. Like all of the it just feels very real. Like all of the like Tyler Perry is really fucking good in this. Like I love his role. as kind of like that spin doctor lawyer, like, and those people that feels so real. And all the little stuff, like, just as she is a manipulator and all of that, like, it's the dark humor is that Ben Affleck's on the other side trying to do the same thing, just in a different way, through the media and through image and through like social media and all that. Like, it's just, it shows two angles of that, while she's like all about like personal, like subtle manipulation. So I think that's kind of a funny analysis of both sides of how that works. But yeah, Rosamund Pike's really, really good here. Like, she's having a lot of fun, I think.
So fun
One
thing
of my
about
favorite
that, I was gonna
You go,
say
Stone.
Fincher cast Rosamund Pike for a couple reasons. One is that she's an only child, and he liked that she was an only child because Amy was an only child. But then also he watched her filmography, and he could not figure out what type of person she was based on her filmography. And he's like, "Oh, that fits Amy very well." And something that's crazy about this movie, and probably Connor, you know about this, and because you love this movie so much, was that I believe Reese Witherspoon was a producer on this film. She basically was the one who wanted to start it, and they hired on Fincher. And Fincher's like, "Thanks for hiring me on. By the way, Reese, because she wanted to play Amy. He's like, Reese, I'm not going to put you as Amy." It completely like took her out of it. So I thought that was very interesting. That something happened behind the scenes.
I'm not gonna lie.
Which I like Reese Witherspoon, but she wouldn't be as good.
I don't think she would be as good, but I think she could have done it. I don't know if that's a hot take. I think she could have done this role, and I think
I agree.
would have been interesting. But it's also like, it's so difficult to watch this with Rosamund Pike and then be like, anyone else could, like, you can't make that connection in your brain really. But I don't think she would have been lost in this role. I'll say.
I think Reese is too big of an actress. That's the thing, is she has to be ambiguous. And she has to not know what's going on in her mind. And I think that Rosamund Pike, because she doesn't have as big a filmography, really fits that really well.
Yeah.
And another thing is, I was going to say, the other big casting thing, I don't know if Connor probably knows about this maybe, is Ben Affleck was not he was not the first choice. And the first choice was John Hamm. And what had happened was he was in the last season of Mad Men, season 6, I believe, and they would not allow him to be in this film. So they casted Ben Affleck instead. And I don't think that John Hamm would have worked, personally.
Yeah, I think you want someone that's capable of being a little more like hapless loser, and I think Ben Affleck like delivered that really well.
One of my favorite details.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay. One of my favorite details, though, is that filming stopped for 3 days because Ben Affleck would refuse to wear a Yankees hat, being from Boston.
Okay, I have something to say about that. I have a video about that up. I don't know if that happened or not, to be honest. Because Affleck has come out and said that it's happened, but I've also listened to really, really popular podcasts. And I guess that during the commentary of the movie, Fincher's like, "Yeah, this happened." And supposedly you're supposed to say that it was sarcasm, that maybe it did happen on set, but not the 3 days thing. But then Affleck has come out and said that it did happen. So I don't know, but
I feel like I trust Ben. I don't know.
Honestly, especially with how much Boston people take that, like, I wouldn't be caught dead in a Yankees hat or jersey. Ever.
Yeah.
do you guys like the casting of Neil Patrick Harris in this?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. I think he again feels like a very real person. I think a lot of people in this do. Have you guys ever met someone that this person reminds you of at all in terms of Amy?
Yes. Like 2018 me, with my ex.
Wait, who's who?
I'm glad I didn't know you in 2018.
You, Amy?
No. Being
Okay.
that blinded,
Yeah.
You see all the
Yeah,
red flags and you just think you're at the circus.
Yeah, I will just say I think she feels very real. And I really enjoy the scene at the end. I don't know the woman's name that plays the main detective. I think she was good. And
She's
I
great
like,
in this. Yeah.
yeah, I like
Kim
at the
Dickens.
end. Yeah, I like at the end when they're all sitting there staring at Amy, and she starts like pressing her and doesn't let her just fucking lie. And like, that's so satisfying because that's so real. And I think there's so many people that just like will sit there and put on shows like that, and like if you don't press them, you're just letting them get away with it. But it just takes someone being like, can you stop and talk about that? Like, what did you say? And like it just unravels, and I just really,
Yeah. The
in
big
a
thing
way.
is she was tied up, and it's like, how'd you get the box cutter if you were tied up?
Um, yeah. So, and what do you guys think about the ending? I think that maybe we should end on that.
I like it. They're both bad people, as we've stated, and they're stuck with each other, and that's what they deserve.
I like that it's left for interpretation too. I mean, like not a lot of interpretation, obviously, because they are together in the end. Like you can speculate like what their future holds.
Do you think either of them
And it,
actually loved the other person?
Amy, yes, because Amy does this thing where they're both flawed, very flawed, but Amy doesn't want anybody that's perfect. She wants to mold them and make them into something, which is why she's not with Neil Patrick Harris. Neil Patrick Harris has a perfect life. He's rich. He has a good job, all this stuff. Nick is a very flawed person. So I think she loves the fact that that Nick is flawed and that she can try to just, keep messing with him, if that makes sense, you know?
But then I also feel
I
like she molded herself too, like because the whole like that whole scene where she's talking about like how she changed herself to appease him. Like, is that because she had a different viewpoint of who he was, and then once she realized, she kind of started thinking about it differently, or like,
I don't know. She's tough. She's a tough character too. I mean, I think they both put on a show when they first met each other. They didn't actually, show each other who they really were, and they try to be happy. That's what you're told that you're supposed to, find the person you're meant to fall in love with, get married, all this stuff. So they put on a show, and then they both realize, hey, this is not who the other person is.
yeah,
I can kind of agree with what Stone was saying about how like the molding and everything, but also I think that like the whole movie she's like lying about how she hates being Amazing Amy in her parents' books growing up. And I think she actually adores the attention and being in the public eye. So I think she's also just there for all that press coverage at the end too. And I think it's going to give Nick something else to write about, so they're both kind of sticking with it for that alone.
yeah, yeah. It's all the like PR aspects of this are very interesting, and it's something like it's kind of an angle that, and also just like like sensationalism, the way the media will take advantage of situation. Like you also see these ridiculous like pundit personalities that are just like milking this for everything it's worth, and they don't care about anything that's happening or the people or anything. They just care about like people watching. I think them kind of like that angle is interesting as well, but it's really just like it's a PR movie, like on top of like media sensationalism and just like looking at marriage, but it's really about like spin doctors kind of. It's interesting.
Talking about media and Fincher, I think there's a story that Fincher looked at like 60 pictures of Ben Affleck smiling, and he really liked the weird way he smiled. And he said that guy's perfect, basically, which is why there's so much focus on that one point in the story where he's next to Amy's picture and he smiles. Like Fincher just really loved that that characteristic about Affleck, how he smiled in public.
That's interesting. Yeah, it seems like he was really cast for a specific reason. Like that's,
I
but
would
with
say
how meticulous Fincher is, like that's not surprising.
my favorite part of the movie, which might surprise you, is I love how much anticipation there is about the interview, and there's a lot leading up to it, and he's getting dressed and he's rehearsing and all this stuff. They're like, okay, here we go, we're going to do the interview, and then you don't see it for a while. When I first logged this movie on Letterbox, the first time I was using Letterbox, I had the book of Gone Girl,
And I went back and I looked and I said, when he's preparing, does it go right into the interview, or does it happen the same way it happened in the film? And in the book, it actually goes right into the interview. And I love that in the film, it subverted your expectations about, okay, here's the interview. Let's go. Let's see what happens. Boom. You don't get to see it for a little bit. I really like that part. That's my favorite part of the film.
I like that too. I think that's fun to like. I mean, I'm a big fan of subverting expectations in general. Like that, I think it's funny, and I like that because it also builds, excuse me, anticipation for a future point in the movie and keeps you like dialed in and keeps you like wondering what's going to come next. Yeah, it's a very well done story. It's really excellent.
You guys will like this fact, but Ben Affleck actually told David Fincher, and he recommended Emily Ratajkowski to David Fincher for the role of his little plaything. So that's funny.
Yeah, I wonder why.
That's crazy.
Oh god.
Anything
All
here on for you guys?
I think I got all my thoughts out.
Yeah.
Just like I agree with Ben Affleck, fuck the Yankees. That's about all I got left.
I agree.
All right, you guys ready to talk about Mank? Because
Yeah.
that's all you two again.
I'll go first. I don't like this very much at all. I think I have kind of like a general indifference to Citizen Kane, which I think is like kind of a starting point of not particularly caring about this. I really like Gary Oldman. I don't really understand this portrayal of the entire situation seems flawed, and I'm not exactly sure why Fincher decided to go ahead and just tell this story in the way that he did, but it seems irresponsible, I think. I think a lot of the conflict between Orson Welles and Mankiewicz feels fabricated because it wasn't particularly like that in real life. And then I think you're basically implying that Mank was fully responsible for Citizens Kane, which is not accurate again. So I just find it confusing as to why this got made, and I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure there's
Do you know who wrote it?
his father, I believe.
That might have had a part of why it got made too.
Yeah, and it just seems like I guess it was a personal decision and a personal movie for him. And it feels that way because you kind of watch it like, who the fuck were you making this for? Like, why did you make this? And I think when you feel that way, it's kind of like they did it for themselves, which you're David Fincher. It's 2020, 21. What year was this?
2019,
19.
I think.
No, 2020. I got it.
2020. You've earned that, and more power to you. But it's not accurate in terms of history by most accounts. So I think that's kind of strange. And I also just don't really think this style lends itself, like Fincher, I don't think he lends himself, his style lends himself to this story. That's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, it's just, I'm never watching it again, most likely.
I kind of liked it,
What do you like
but
about it?
not extremely. I thought it was very interesting. Like you said, I think there's a very why did he make this? Imagine being a director and your dad wrote a script, and your dad's like, "Can you?" Because as far as I could tell, his dad hasn't done anything else.
No.
Like,
have it
I
pulled
mean, what do you do? You know?
Yeah, and that's
But
very fair. I mean,
I thought it was very interesting. It's crazy. This feels like an Oscar movie.
Yep.
I mean, and that might be a lot of the reason why he made it too. It's like saying, well, I've had such a long career. My dad gave me this script. Maybe it's time I try to go for an Oscar, which this movie was nominated for 11 or 10, I believe, which is insane. And then I think it won 2, but like for, I think, costume design and then also maybe cinematography as well, which makes sense. I'm confused why Amanda Seyfried got nominated. I think Gary Oldman's really good in it. Amanda Seyfried, she did fine. Wasn't really a standout because I just watched this like not too long ago today. I think she was fine. I thought the story is very interesting because I haven't watched Citizen Kane. So coming from that perspective of not watching it, I thought it was very interesting. Showed you a lot about Hollywood. The style was different. One thing I didn't like, who was that actor we were talking about earlier from Game of Thrones? I think if I understood correctly, the whole film was about him, basically. And he's the reason why Citizen Kane's being written. It's basically about his story and about him. But he's not necessarily in the film that much, which I thought was very interesting. I mean, it is called Mank, but I thought that was a very interesting creative decision not to put him in the film that often. The guy who runs MGM is more in the film than he is. But I did like the shot. What was that?
Louis Mayer.
Yeah. So I thought the story was interesting. I probably won't watch it again, but I thought it was good to look at. The vibe of going in and out between, present time and in the past and all that stuff, I feel like very much fit with the feel of the movie, the fading in and out that he was trying to do. But yeah, nothing too special, to be honest. I thought the story was interesting. I thought the feel was nice. Gary Oldman's really good. But that's about it. So I thought it was pretty solid, unique because I don't watch movies like this stylized like this very often. So there might be a lot better ones out there, kind of thing. But yeah, that's my kind of perspective on it. And one thing that can't be overlooked, I feel like, is this gap. Gap in between Gone Girl and Mank, because there's very important things that we're talking about Fincher that happened. Fincher catapulted Netflix. If you think about it, Fincher, I believe, directed the first few episodes of House of Cards, which is very important. And Fincher loves Netflix, and he still has said that after The Killers come out. And he was able to make a show like The Mindhunter, which came in between Gone Girl and Mank. So I feel like that's very interesting how he's still so involved with Netflix, because he basically had a part in starting it, with creating House of Cards. So I don't think he'll leave Netflix anytime soon, which is insane. The fact that we haven't had a David Fincher film be released in theaters like traditionally since 2014, almost 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that's a mistake. I think it's a waste, and I think it's like, I don't want to say this in a rude way. I feel like he's like dumbing himself down in a way. And to be real, the last 2 movies he's made with Netflix are in the bottom third of what he's made, most likely, for the majority of the people. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what he's doing. I'm sure the money is really, really good. And I'm sure I know what he's doing. There's a feeling of comfort. There's a feeling of reliability when you have the backdrop of streaming services, especially when you don't maybe feel as, David Fincher, I think, thinks people are dumb animals, honestly. So I think he might not have like the most faith in the theatrical releases and like things being profitable. So yeah, I think maybe having that feels safe, but like I think it just doesn't feel right. Like he is one of the better directors of the past quarter century. So I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't like it that much, and I don't
think anybody likes it except him, because like we talked about Alien 3, there's no studio interference. There's zero studio interference with Netflix. The only thing that's going to be interfering with him is the fact that he will not make probably any more TV shows for Netflix, because he can't make season 3 of Mindhunter because it's just getting views. Mindhunter is excellent. It's a brilliant show, but those types of shows don't get views on Netflix. So he can make whatever movie he wants with the service. And I feel like that is so attractive to him. He doesn't really care about, like you said, if he released a movie in theaters, there's the concern, it doesn't make enough money. It doesn't matter, because Netflix wants someone like Fincher on the service, and he wants the ability to have complete creative freedom, as meticulous as he is. And that's just a perfect match. Nobody likes it except Fincher.
It's funny you're saying all that too, and at the in the episode, you were talking about how it's hard to find any of his movies on a streaming service right now. Like, you would think Netflix would want to pick up all of his work now from how much he's done for them.
It's all about
Which they
contracts and stuff,
should.
licensing.
Yeah. Hopefully they will. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Mank. And you were talking about like Charles Dance, like that's another thing. Like I think this movie exaggerates greatly his relevance to the story, which again, just like why? Like I don't understand, but I'm sure there was a reason that this was written in the first place. You know, Fincher's dad, like whatever. You don't know what kind of personal stuff goes into it, like whatever. But yeah, this is just forgettable for me.
I'm glad I'm not like you, and I wish I was like you at the same time, because I wish I knew so much about history and all this stuff, but I'm glad that I go into this movie because I can just view it as it is, where it's you. It's a very different story. And it's very interesting because you have to think about both types of people. You have to think about people when you're making a film like me, is this going to be entertaining? Which it wasn't that entertaining, but I thought it was solid. But
Yeah.
then you also have to think about the people who actually know the true story as well. So I think you're seeing the two types of people that view Mank right here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and I made that comment to Dan too about military movies. Like, I pick out a bunch of shit that bothers me that like the average person would never know.
Yeah, and I think you frequently have to decide when you're making a movie, am I going for the and I mean this conversation again, this is its own video, but like this was just the thing with Napoleon. Like you have all these freaking people bugging out about every detail in Napoleon not being textbook accurate, and it's like those textbook Master and Commander is one of my favorite movies ever made. That's textbook accurate. It's brilliant. I think it's one of the best things ever made. No one cares about that movie. Like most people don't care about it. I love it, but like it doesn't make money. It doesn't live on like in the mainstream. So like you have to choose between like spectacle and making a entertaining movie a lot of times, or telling things how they were. And like, you know, it's difficult. It's not like easy. So you know, I see both sides for sure.
It's the same thing with the Social
Right.
Network too, because that's a biopic too, and there's a lot of made up stuff in the Social Network as well.
Yeah,
My
but
favorite
you're
movie.
making a movie. Like it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a documentary. Like there's balance. And like
The only person who really cares is Zuckerberg, which I get that.
yeah. And it's like, did fucking Napoleon charge in on his fucking horse at Waterloo with his like cavalry? No. But like, does it look good on the screen? Yeah. Like, you know, it's a movie. Like no one's gonna sit there and watch him fucking drink coffee while he watches people fight for 2 hours, 3 hours. Like, so yeah, it's annoying.
So, Connor, if you don't know about the story behind Citizen Kane, you'll probably like it a little bit more. But it's a fine movie that you don't really have to watch again after you view it one time, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now I'll probably knock out the rest of Fincher this week.
Yep.
All right, are we ready to talk about The Killer?
Yeah.
Newest installment. My initial thoughts, the first act was like peak cinema, and the rest of the movie is just all right.
What do you like the most about the first act?
I just kind of like showing like how methodical he is, like him walking you through all his steps, why he sleeps the way he does, like, you know, his eating habits, like how you have to wait, the heartbeat, all of that until he misses that shot, you know?
Yeah. Stone, what are your feelings?
Well, I mean, the more and more I read about it and listen to people talk about it, the more I like it. Something that's very interesting that I hate this, but I had this thought going in is I knew that there was going to be a lot of product placement, right? And when I was doing my Fincher rewatch, there's a lot of product placement in all of his fucking movies. There's tons everywhere. This is the most obvious one when you have an Amazon, thing right on the screen. But there's product placement obviously in Fight Club, and there's a lot of product placement in Gone Girl and The Social Network, and all this stuff. And I hate that I went into this film, my very first viewing, because I haven't rewatched it. And I'm like, oh, look at all this product placement. And then I go back and watch his entire filmography. I'm like, it's everywhere. But yeah, it's very interesting because the thing that people forget about is that this guy's not that good of a killer during this movie. He makes mistakes, obviously the initial hit, but the fact that he's sitting over, isn't that time where he thinks that one guy, Keith David, that's not Keith David, that one guy's gonna pass away. He's like, oh, you have this amount of time, and then he just dies, like right in front of him, and you're like, oh shit, he was wrong. Just little things like that. It's there's a lot of unwrapping. I feel like there's a lot of more things under the surface because I feel it's like a very basic story, and I know it's not that because it's Fincher, but because I'm simple-minded, I got the basic part of it during my first viewing, and I'm really excited to go back and watch it. But yeah, that was one thing I wish that I didn't have going into it was all the product placement because that's something that you shouldn't focus on, and it's hard not to. One key thing that I didn't catch up on until recently is there's a scene in the movie where he's shipping out something, and they're like, "Do you want fast overnight?" And she goes, "No, 2 days." I'm like, okay, cool. And that is on later in the movie is when he ships to that building, and that a FedEx guy is going into that building. That is the package that he sent. He purposely. I don't know if you guys caught on to that. You probably did, but yeah, I didn't realize that when I first viewed it. But
Yeah, I think there's a funny. I don't know if it's funny. I think there's a lot of commentary in this movie about service workers. Like he has a cab driver that he literally just fucking shoots, murders, and just like leaves the door open and just walks away. And I think there's also like obviously the delivery driver later on that he poses himself like he poses as, but also follows the guy in and out. Like I think there's commentary about like how invisible a lot of those people are and how they just blend in as like part of society that we all actually rely on, but they're just kind of like fodder for the world. This movie is really, I think there's a lot of commentary on like capitalism in general. He is a basically like robot of capitalism itself. He doesn't give a shit about anything in life. He doesn't care about people. He does exactly what he has to do to get paid. His entire like mantra, his core values that he always is repeating over and over again are just based around getting things done efficiently and moving on. Like he's a robot. Like he's like a automaton. Like there's nothing to him. So I think there's kind of some funny commentary there. But I also think like this is Fincher talking about himself, like, or at least maybe how he's perceived. And I think maybe there's some kind of comedy there as well, because he's maybe saying people perceive me to be this, awful, monotonous robot that demands all these takes, and he's so hard to work with, and he's so dark and this and that. But he does care about the woman that gets attacked that he's with or whatever. Like he does make mistakes. And to me, I thought like him missing that shot. I feel like I felt like that was about Mank. Like, and I think there's a lot of humor in his reactions. Like a lot of times he doesn't care that he missed, or he doesn't care about the person that died. He cares that he's like, oh, I missed. Like, how did that happen? And I think even when he's going about his revenge, he's like almost trying to prove that he's still capable. It's not like he cares about the person who was attacked, but like it's not overwhelming grief. It's like this is an inconvenience. Like, I enjoy being around this person, but I also like am annoyed with myself that I made a mistake and my process, maybe it might not be infallible. So I'm going to try to prove that I'm still capable, that I can still do everything I need to do. So yeah, I think this is like, again, I think Fincher really likes being meta, and this is the most meta fucking movie I've watched in a long time. But again, to the average, like to the person watching this who just wants to see like something entertaining, they're gonna watch this and be like, "Yo, I'm fucking bored."
And you have to look at it that way too, because I feel like people are like, "Oh, you have to think about a casual viewer." People who love Fincher, 5 out of 5, right? But people who are just like, "Does this entertain me?" Maybe not as much,
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said in my review at the end. Like, if you're just looking for entertainment, like, don't watch this. Like, you're not throwing this on to like eat pizza on a Friday night and like have a good time. Like, it's monotonous. But it's like, And even as a Fincher fan, like I wouldn't say it's perfect. It's just like I think it's really funny and like in a dark way. But like that's about it. And I'm not gonna go back and like rewatch this many times, maybe once or twice more. So I think it's very interesting and just Fincher doing something again for himself.
You know, sometimes being on a podcast with you, I feel so inferior when you go on your rants like that.
No, I mean, I also think way too much into things, and like, again, like Stone just said, the average person doesn't give a fuck about all of that.
Yeah.
You're watching a movie to be entertained. Like, it's not, you don't want to see a director just like jerk himself off. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's,
This is very similar
Yep.
to Panic Room, in my opinion, because Panic Room, he did that movie because he wanted to do that style of movie, right? Fincher did this movie for himself, and it's something I find fascinating and surprising is the fact that, like Panic Room, unlike the rest of Fincher's movies, this script is very simple and basic. I mean, he got it from a comic, which is very interesting because I feel like, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Fight Club, even The Social Network,
Gone
Zodiac. There's so much, Gone Girl. Yeah, my bad. Gone Girl. There's so much richness in those stories that he tells, and that's more at the top of his filmography. Everyone loves that, but he chose to do something about a comic, which is very interesting to me. So I think this is better than Panic Room, but in my opinion, the reason why it is limited for me is because it's just, I love it when Fincher's films are more rich, in my opinion, because I think he does that really well.
yeah. And I do like the moments of dialogue and like back and forth between characters, like, and it's mostly people talking at him, which I think is very funny. Like he watches people like a jaguar, like a big cat. Like that's what he's like. Like there's nothing, he doesn't care. Like he doesn't really, but people are all trying to like, he basically kills everyone he meets in the movie, essentially. He meets someone, they're
Besides the last guy.
they're trying to work out of it, and then he kills them. Which is an interesting way to set up a movie. It's like he's such a solitary animal. Like there's no one else that means anything to him outside of the woman he ends up with at the end, who's
I didn't like that because they spend so little time developing that at all, and he doesn't really mention her the rest of the story. But that's the driving force. That's one thing about the film that I kind of can't forgive. Like you can say, oh, he's so focused on himself, not really human, robotic. But the reason they hurt that woman, which is the reason why he goes on his killing streak. But they spend so little time on that.
That's the thing. I don't feel that's the main reason he did it. I think he felt like he fucked up and had to prove himself. I think she is a added bonus. I think he probably, if you were to talk to that character about that relationship, she's probably just as much of a camouflage for him to blend in the world as his clothes. And like just as much of a day-to-day, just kind of extra, just piece of being a human. Like he is an alien. Like, and even when he's sitting there at the end, I really like that shot. Like that shot of him, like he's not there. Like nobody's home. Like it's almost like a shell of a person. And he's just kind of probably waiting there for his next job or for whatever he decides to do next. Like it's, yeah, I would say I don't think that was the main motivation. I think he was displeased with his failure and then wanted to clean it up or prove something to himself. But I could be completely wrong. That's kind of how I read it.
I kind of agree with you now that you've like laid it out like that. I think Michael Fassbender was fantastic in this too.
Yeah, and it's like Fincher gets these people and then he has them do exactly what they're good at. Like he doesn't try to make, and again, another sports analogy, Bill Belichick for all those years, all he did was find other teams' trash and say, what do you do well? Oh, you got cut from the Bengals. Did you do well? What were they trying to make you do that you don't do? I'm going to let you do exactly what you're good at. Do that for me, nothing else. For as long as you're capable, then I'll let you go. Like he just let people do what they do and doesn't try to make them do other things. That's what great coaches do. That's what great directors do. Like that's what Fincher does. and he might be hard to work with, but he also gets the best fucking performances from these people that they're capable of over and over and over again. And like, what more can you want as an actor? Like, even though it's difficult, like, what more can you want? It just puts you on display in the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys have anything else on this, or you want to rip our rankings?
Just real quick on the woman aspect. Yeah, I'm still coming because you're very good at dissecting films, right? And you see that aspect of him. That doesn't matter to him, right? He's more on this revenge thing, not for the woman, right? But the fact that someone got the upper hand on him, right? Beat him at his own job, kind of thing, and that's not supposed to happen. But I still think you have, just by including her, like you could have not included her, right? Someone could have broken into their home, stolen something like that. But when you include a female interests, the casual viewer, like myself, automatically thinks that person is important to him. He's in the hospital. He goes and he is with her in the hospital. Then he goes on. Then he goes on his revenge thing. Obviously, that person is very important to him from a script standpoint because he goes directly from the hospital on his revenge thing. But she's not really mentioned at all in the film anymore. And you're like, does he really care about this woman? He doesn't. I mean, that's his thing. He doesn't really talk. But you still got to think of those things. Like,
Yeah. And I think there's enough.
That scene matters.
There's enough emotional registration of that event for him to like. I can see your viewpoint. Like it's not like he doesn't just fucking cold stone face the whole thing. So it's like I almost wish they had let it be one or the other more fully. Yeah. It seems like a miss. So because I do 100% see your point of view.
I would have liked it if they didn't have that shot of him. Oh yeah.
What, Connor?
He doesn't blink in this movie at all.
That's a cool detail. And again, that's the like big cat energy. Like just your food. Like that's it. Like it's a good performance. And again, this is Fassbender. It's nothing new. But it's really good.
He doesn't really act anymore, right? He does racing, right? Doesn't he race cars now? I mean, he's in Next Goal Wins, but he didn't really do anything before these two movies.
2015 or 2014, I think, was his last job. I could be wrong, but yeah.
Next Goal Wins was actually filmed in 2019, and I believe actually included Armie Hammer. So they actually had to do a lot of reshoots and take Armie Hammer out of that movie and replace him with Will Arnett, which is not that I haven't watched that movie, but I feel like people are being too hard on it because that movie production was not good on it at all.
Yeah. Fassbender also he had legal stuff. He actually I mean he was accused of like doing some pretty awful shit to his girlfriend, I think a couple times, and I think he kind of went away for a while because of that, or maybe not necessarily because of that, but like just. And he just needed a break. I think he also loves driving. I've heard people speak on both sides of what happened in terms of like the validity, and I'm not completely up to date on the legal status of that, but it definitely was something happened. So that's a shame to hear, but he is a very good actor. I hope what they said happened didn't actually happen, but I wasn't even aware of that for a long time. I actually made a movie, and if you guys like, this is just a little tangent, but if you like Fassbender, watch Slow West. It's like an 85-minute Western with him. It's really, really good. And it's, again, right in his wheelhouse. If you like this, you'll like Slow West a lot. And it's an excellent story.
I'll have to add that to my forever growing watch list.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that. That's when that person commented all that stuff about Fassbender.
Yep. But yeah, it's worth watching.
All right. Well, Stone, you want to lead us with your ranking of David Fincher?
My ranking. All right. This is at the top of my head. All right. I don't have anything written in front of me. My laptop is dead. We know that there's been technical issues. So we're going to go with Alien 3 at the bottom, unfortunately. That might go up on a rewatch when I do not watch it with Aliens and that film, because that made it not good to me when you watch them in a row. Just a very big dip in quality. Second, I'm going to go Panic Room. Like I said, compared to all of his other things, I just think it's a really solid movie, but it's just fine. It's a fine movie. I think the characters could have been developed a lot more, but you can only do so much when it's a one room situation. Third, I'm going to go to the game. Or third, I guess. Next, I'm going to go to the game. Based on what Dan has said, I've only watched the movie once. I think there's a lot of underlying themes that I'll have to get, but I think that it's just the story itself is the most interesting part, not necessarily a really big memorable scene. Next, I'm gonna go Mank. Surprisingly, I really do like the style of Mank. I think it is very interesting when you watch it the one time. The performance from Gary Oldman is a lot better than I think Michael Douglas is in the game, which I do really like performances. I like the story, a lot more interesting than the game as well. Next, I'm going to go The Killer. I think this could get better on a rewatch. I've only watched it one time. It's very entertaining. A lot of deep things there that not a lot of people see on the first viewing, so I'm excited to revisit. I didn't get to talk about it because we had the technical difficulty, but I'm going to go Curious Case of Benjamin Button next. I really do like that story a lot. It is very different. I think it was very funny. I didn't get to talk about it a lot. I think it's funny how they made Brad Pitt into a very believable old man, but Kate Blanchett still looks beautiful when you're trying to make her look like she's 80. Thought that was very hilarious. But yeah, I do like it. I think it's a very good love story. Next, I'm going to go Seven. Incredible movie. The fact that it's his second film, and like you said, I think in the IM or the Letterboxd top 250, very solid. Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, very memorable. Kevin Spacey is a great villain. Next, I'm going to go probably Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That is one that I definitely know will get better on rewatch, but I've only watched it one time. I don't like that it kind of feels like it sets up a sequel a little bit, and also I get confused with the names. But yeah, that's there. Gone Girl, I have a really soft spot next with Gone Girl in my heart. I watched Gone Girl a lot of time. It's probably, besides Social Network, the Fincher movie I watched the most. I really like it. I think Affleck and Rosamund Pike are perfect. Great story. Next is Zodiac. Perfectly story for Fincher. I think all the performances are great. I love that it makes you try to solve the mystery along with them. And then I'm going to go Fight Club at number 2. I believe I haven't missed any. And then I'm going to go Social Network at number 1. Like I said, I think it's the most important film of the 2010s, with just talking about the fact that it talks about Facebook and how much that changed over the 2010s, and the fact that this came out in 2010. Pretty astonishing. I just love everything's working so great. Best score, maybe best performance with Eisenberg out of any Fincher's films. I mean, I think Affleck's the best casted, but I think Eisenberg maybe has the best performance. So yeah, I'm gonna go Social Network number 1. But I don't think I missed anything.
All right, Dan.
So I'm going with Alien 3, Dead Last. Next is Benjamin Button. This just doesn't work for me very well. It feels like an outlier for Fincher. Then Mank. I love Gary Oldman. It saves it from being last or second to last. That's about it here. Next, this is where I start. I would say enjoyment, like legitimate enjoyment. Panic Room. I think it's excellent at what it does. It excels at being what it is. Next is The Killer. Again, I'm not going to go back to this much. I honestly think I might rewatch Panic Room before I rewatch The Killer. But I can also really appreciate what Fincher was doing. I think a lot of it's really funny, like I said, but at the end of the day, you also do need to tell an interesting story. You can't just be filling the screen with subtext. So that's where I lose it. Next, 10, 9, 8. This would be 7. At number 7, I have 7. It's a good movie.